When the sheriff's iron fist came down on Red Hollow, forcing every unmarried man to claim a bride or leave town, no one expected what happened next. The strongest cowboy in the territory, a man who'd broken horses, outlasted droughts, and never bent to anyone, stood in that dusty square and made a choice that turned everything upside down. He didn't pick the mayor's daughter. He didn't pick the beautiful widow everyone wanted. He looked straight past them all and pointed at her, the Chinese woman everyone despised, the one they whispered about, the one they said didn't belong. And when he spoke those three words, "I choose her," the whole damn town forgot how to breathe. But here's what they didn't know. That choice wasn't kindness. It wasn't love. It was something darker, more complicated, and it would rip this frontier town apart from the inside out. If you want to see how a single moment can shatter everything you thought you knew about strength, about worth, about what it means to survive in a world that wants you gone, stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from, because I want to see how far this story can travel. The sun hung low and mean over Red Hollow, turning the dirt streets the color of dried blood. Maylin pressed herself against the back wall of the general store, her fingers digging into the rough planks behind her. She could hear them gathering in the square, boots on boardwalks, voices rising, that particular electricity that came before something bad happened. She shouldn't have come into town. Her uncle had told her to stay at the laundry, keep her head down, wait for this whole mess to blow over. But they'd run out of lye soap, and someone had to get more. And her uncle's hands shook too much these days to carry anything heavier than a teacup. "You hear what the sheriff's doing?" A woman's voice drifted around the corner. Mei Lin recognized it. Mrs. Patterson, who ran the boarding house and had once thrown a bucket of wash water on Mei Lin's feet because she'd been standing too close to the front steps. "Forcing them all to marry." Another voice, younger, "says it's the only way to civilize this town. Can't have a proper settlement with just men and prostitutes." "About time. My Susanna's been waiting 2 years for a proposal." Mei Lin's hand started to sweat. Marriage. Of course that's what this was about. She'd heard the rumors. Sheriff Dalton had been talking about it for months, ever since the territorial governor started making noise about shutting down towns that couldn't prove they were family establishments. But she thought it was just talk, the kind of bluster men threw around when they drank too much whiskey. She should go, right now, slip back to the laundry before, "Everyone to the square, now!" The sheriff's voice boomed across the town, and Mei Lin's stomach dropped. That means everyone. I see anyone skulking around, they'll spend the night in a cell. Her throat went dry. She couldn't go back to the laundry now. She'd have to pass right by the square, and they'd see her. They always saw her. Even when she tried to be invisible, even when she kept her eyes down and her mouth shut, they found her. Like she gave off some kind of signal that drew their attention, their mockery, their casual cruelty. Footsteps approached. Mei Lin pressed harder against the wall, as if she could somehow push through it and disappear. "You there?" A deputy she didn't recognize grabbed her arm. "Didn't you hear? Square, now. I don't need to—" "Everyone means everyone, China girl." He jerked her forward hard enough to make her stumble. "Move." The square was packed. Mei Lin had never seen so many people in one place in Red Hollow. Must have been every soul within 20 miles. The women clustered on one side near the church, arranged like merchandise, their mothers and aunts fussing with their hair and dresses. The men stood opposite, looking anywhere but at the women, their discomfort rolling off them in waves. And in the middle, standing on a crate so everyone could see him, was Sheriff Dalton. He was a big man, all belly and bluster, with a mustache he was absurdly proud of, and a badge he treated like a crown. "All right, listen up." He raised his hands. "I know some of you got complaints about this, and I don't give a damn. The governor's office has made it clear. Towns that want territorial funding need to show they're stable, civilized places. That means families. That means marriages. That means you boys stop acting like this is some kind of bachelor paradise and start acting like men." A few grumbles rippled through the male side. One man spat tobacco juice onto the dirt. "Here's how this works," Dalton continued. "Each unmarried man will choose a woman. You got a sweetheart already. Good for you. Make it official. You don't, well, you better figure it out quick. You refuse, you got 24 hours to pack your things and get out of Red Hollow. Permanently. The grumbling got louder. A man near the front, Mei Lin recognized him as Jack Porter, who worked at the livery, spoke up. "You can't force us to marry people we don't even know." "I just did." Dalton's hand rested on his gun belt, casual but clear. "Anyone else got objections they want to share?" Silence. The kind that felt like a hand over your mouth. Mei Lin tried to make herself smaller. She'd positioned herself at the very back of the women's section, partially hidden behind a wagon. Maybe they'd forget about her. Maybe in all the chaos she could just slip away and, well. Dalton's eyes found her like a hawk spotting a mouse. "Didn't think you'd show up to this, Mei Lin." Every head turned. Dozens of eyes locked onto her. She felt her face go hot. I'm not here to... You're unmarried, aren't you?" "Yes, but I'm not... I don't expect..." "Then you're part of this." He gestured broadly. "Everyone participates. Fair's fair." A laugh rippled through the crowd. Not kind laughter, the kind that had teeth. "Who'd want to marry her?" someone stage whispered. More laughter. Mei Lin stared at the ground. Just get through this. Just survive. "All right, let's get started." Dalton pulled out a list. "We're doing this alphabetical by the men's names. Adams, you're first. Step up and make your choice." This was how it went for the next hour. Names called. Men stepping forward, some confident, some reluctant. Women claimed like prizes at a county fair. Some matches made sense, couples who'd been courting already. Others were clearly desperate calculations. Older men grabbing younger women. Poor women accepting proposals from men they barely knew, because what choice did they have? Mei Lin watched it all with a growing knot in her stomach. The group of unclaimed women shrank, and shrank, and shrank, until she was the only one left. She stood there alone while the whole town stared. Her dress was clean but old, patched in places. Her hair was pulled back in a simple braid, no ribbons or ornaments. She knew what they saw when they looked at her. Not quite Chinese anymore after being in America for 6 years, but definitely not one of them. Not white enough, not pretty enough, not worth choosing. "Well," Dalton said, and she could hear the smirk in his voice, "looks like we got one more." The remaining unmarried men shuffled their feet. There were 3 of them left. Young Tommy Brewer, barely 18, who'd gone red as a beet and was staring at his boots. Samuel Morrison, the drunk who could barely hold down a job at the mine. And Mei Lin's eyes caught on the 3rd man, and her breath stuck in her throat. Caleb Rourke. Everyone knew about Caleb Rourke. He'd shown up in Red Hollow 2 years ago with a reputation that preceded him like a dust storm. Said he'd been a soldier, though he never talked about which war or which side. Said he'd killed men in Texas over a land dispute. Said he'd once broken a man's jaw for cheating at cards, and the sheriff in that town had thanked him for it. He was tall. Not just tall, but towering. 6'4" at least, built like he'd been carved out of granite. Dark hair that needed cutting, a jaw covered in stubble, and eyes that didn't blink much. He had a ranch about 10 miles out of town, ran it alone, came into Red Hollow maybe once a month for supplies. Kept to himself, spoke only when necessary. And everyone was terrified of him. Not because he caused trouble, he didn't. But there was something about Caleb Rourke that made people want to cross to the other side of the street. Something quiet and dangerous, like a stick of dynamite sitting in the sun. "Brewer," Dalton said, "you're up." Tommy looked like he might cry. He glanced at Mei Lin, then at the sheriff, then at his own feet. "Sir, I'm only 18. Can't I wait a year or 2 before—" "Choose or leave, son." Tommy's face crumpled, but instead of stepping forward, he backed up. "I'll leave." A gasp went through the crowd. His mother started crying, but Tommy just shook his head and pushed through the crowd, walking fast toward the edge of town. "Morrison!" The drunk swayed slightly, looked at Mei Lin with bleary eyes. "No offense, sweetheart, but I'd rather drink myself to death alone. I'm out." He shambled away, and no one tried to stop him, which left one. The square went so quiet Mei Lin could hear her own heartbeat. She stood frozen as Dalton turned to face the last man. "Rourke." Caleb didn't move. His arms were crossed over his chest, his expression unreadable. He looked at the sheriff with the kind of patience that felt aggressive. "You know the rules," Dalton said. "Choose or leave." For a long moment, Caleb said nothing, just stood there like a mountain, immovable and silent. The crowd held its breath. Then he spoke, his voice low and rough. I'm not choosing. Mei Lin felt something twist in her chest. Of course he wasn't. Why would he? Even a man like Caleb Rourke had standards, and she didn't meet them. Nobody wanted her. Not her family back in Guangdong who'd sent her here to make money. Not her uncle who looked at her like a debt he couldn't repay. Not this town that treated her like dirt on their boots. And certainly not— Then pack your things, Dalton said. I own land here, Caleb said. Paid cash. Built a house, barn, corrals. You're telling me I have to abandon all that because I won't participate in your circus? I'm telling you the rules are the rules. Something flickered across Caleb's face. Anger, maybe, or calculation. His eyes swept across the square, across the married couples, the smug faces of the women who'd been chosen, the men who looked relieved it was over. Then his gaze landed on Mei Lin. She felt it like a physical thing, that look. Heavy and assessing. She wanted to run, to hide, to disappear into the ground, but she couldn't move. Could barely breathe. Caleb's jaw tightened. He uncrossed his arms. Fine, he said. I choose her. The world stopped. Mei Lin's ears started ringing. She couldn't have heard that right. Couldn't have. Because Caleb Rourke, the man everyone feared, the man who talked to maybe 5 people in the entire town, did not just choose her, but the silence around her said otherwise. Then it broke. What? Mrs. Patterson's voice shot across the square. You can't be serious. The China girl? Someone else said, voice dripping with disbelief. Is this a joke? Dalton looked as shocked as everyone else, but he recovered quickly. You sure about this, Rourke? Caleb's expression didn't change. I said what I said, but she's— The sheriff seemed to struggle for words that wouldn't sound too obviously racist in front of the whole town. You could leave, start over somewhere else. You don't have to— I'm not leaving my land. Caleb's voice had an edge now, like a knife being slowly unsheathed. You said choose or leave. I chose. We done here. Dalton's mouth opened and closed. Finally, he nodded. All right then. You two come by my office tomorrow morning. We'll make it official. And just like that, Mei Lin's life changed. The crowd erupted in whispers. She stood there shaking as people stared and muttered and laughed. Because of course they laughed. This was the funniest thing that had happened in Red Hollow all year. Caleb Rourke, the most feared man in the territory, choosing the Chinese laundry girl nobody wanted. Caleb walked toward her. The crowd parted like he was Moses, and they were the Red Sea. He stopped a few feet away, looking down at her with those unreadable eyes. Can you ride a horse? He asked. Mei Lin's voice came out barely above a whisper. No. Can you shoot a gun? No. Cook? A little. He nodded once, like this confirmed something. Be at the sheriff's office at 8 tomorrow morning. Don't be late. Then he turned and walked away, his boots kicking up dust, leaving Mei Lin standing alone in a square full of people who would never let her forget this. The walk back to the laundry felt like the longest mile of her life. People stared from windows. A group of men outside the saloon called out crude jokes that made her ears burn. She kept her head down and walked faster. Her uncle was waiting in the back room when she arrived, his thin frame hunched over a ledger. He looked up when she entered, his weathered face creasing with concern. Mei Lin, I heard what happened. Of course he had. News traveled fast in Red Hollow, especially when it was humiliating. Uncle, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to— You're getting married. He said it flat, matter of fact. I don't want to. I'll find a way to— To what? He set down his pen. Refuse? They'll make you leave. Where will you go? You have no money, no family here except me, and I can barely feed myself. The truth of it hit her like a fist. She had nothing, no options, no escape routes. She was trapped. This Rourke man, her uncle continued, he's dangerous. People say— I know what people say. Do you know why he chose you? Mei Lin shook her head. That was the question burning in her mind since the moment he'd spoken. Why her? Why would a man like that choose her? Maybe he needs a servant, her uncle said quietly. Someone to cook and clean. Chinese wives are known for being obedient. The word made her flinch. She thought of her mother back home, the way she'd moved through their house like a ghost, never speaking unless spoken to, her whole life defined by service to others. "I won't be like that," Mei Lin said. Her uncle looked at her sadly. "You might not have a choice." That night, Mei Lin lay on her thin mat in the back room and stared at the ceiling. Sleep wouldn't come. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Caleb Rourke's face, heard his rough voice saying, "I choose her," like it meant nothing, like she meant nothing. Maybe she didn't. She'd been in America for 6 years, sent by parents who couldn't afford another mouth to feed. The plan had been simple: work in her uncle's laundry, send money home, maybe save enough to bring her younger sister over, build a life. But building a life required being seen as human first. And in Red Hollow, she wasn't. She was the China girl. She was the butt of jokes. She was someone to avoid, to mock, to throw water at when she got too close to the nice buildings. And now she was going to marry a stranger everyone feared. Mei Lin turned onto her side, pulling the thin blanket up to her chin. The fabric smelled like lye and sweat, and the despair that seemed to seep into everything she owned. Tomorrow morning, she'd go to the sheriff's office. She'd sign whatever paper they put in front of her. She'd become Mrs. Caleb Rourke, a woman married to a man she'd never spoken to in a town that despised her. And then what? She didn't let herself think about that part. Morning came too fast. Mei Lin dressed in her best clothes, which meant a different dress, slightly less faded, with only one patch. She braided her hair carefully, her fingers trembling. Her uncle gave her a small cloth bundle. "What's this?" "Your things. Not much, but—" He trailed off, his eyes wet. Mei Lin felt her throat tighten. This was goodbye. After today, she wouldn't live here anymore. Wouldn't see her uncle every day. Wouldn't hear the familiar sounds of the laundry, the bubbling wash water, and the snap of wet fabric. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything." He touched her face gently, the way her father used to. "Be smart. Be careful. Survive." The sheriff's office smelled like coffee and tobacco. Dalton sat behind his desk, looking annoyed at having to be there so early. A young clerk stood nearby with papers. Caleb was already there, leaning against the wall. He'd cleaned up, trimmed his beard, wore a shirt that didn't look like it had been slept in. But his eyes still had that same flat, unreadable quality. "About time," Dalton muttered when Mei Lin entered. "Let's get this over with. Stand there, both of you." They stood side by side. Caleb was so tall that Mei Lin's head barely reached his shoulder. She could feel the heat radiating off him, smell soap and leather and something else she couldn't identify. The ceremony, if you could call it that, took 3 minutes. Dalton read from a book in a bored monotone. The clerk handed them papers to sign. Mei Lin's hand shook so badly she could barely write her name. "There," Dalton said, stamping the document. "You're married. Congratulations. Get out of my office." That was it. No celebration. No well wishes. Just papers and stamps and a sheriff who couldn't wait for them to leave. Caleb picked up his hat from the desk. "Come on." Mei Lin followed him outside, where a horse and wagon waited. He climbed up onto the seat, then looked down at her expectantly. She stared at the wagon. It was high off the ground. No steps. No help. How do I—" Caleb reached down. For a terrible moment, she thought he was going to leave her there. But he grabbed her arm and hauled her up with one hand, setting her on the seat beside him like she weighed nothing. "Hold on," he said and snapped the reins. The wagon lurched forward. Mei Lin grabbed the seat to keep from falling off. They rolled through town, past the general store and the saloon and the church. People stopped to stare. She heard laughter, heard someone say, "There goes Rourke's China doll." Caleb's jaw tightened, but he didn't slow down. Just kept the horse moving at a steady pace until the buildings of Red Hollow disappeared behind them, and there was nothing but open land stretching in every direction. Mei Lin had never been outside town before. Never seen this much empty space. It was terrifying and beautiful at the same time. The way the grass rolled like ocean waves, the way the sky seemed to go on forever. They rode in silence for what felt like hours. The sun climbed higher. Mei Lin's legs started to ache from sitting. Her mouth went dry, but she didn't ask for water, didn't ask anything, just held on and tried not to fall off. Finally, Caleb spoke. "You scared of me?" The question caught her off guard. I don't know. That's honest, at least." He adjusted the reins. "Most people are." "Why?" Because I don't smile much. Because I'm big. Because I mind my own business and people don't trust that. He glanced at her. And because I've done things worth being scared of. Mei Lin's heart started beating faster. What kind of things? The kind I don't talk about. Great. Wonderful. She'd married a killer who didn't talk about his killings. This was going so well. Why did you choose me? The words came out before she could stop them. Caleb was quiet for a long moment. The wagon creaked. The horse's hooves thumped against the dirt. Because they expected me to choose someone else, he finally said. Because Dalton was smug as hell about his little marriage scheme, and I wanted to knock that smirk off his face. Because you looked like you wanted to disappear, and I know that feeling. He paused. And because nobody else was going to. It wasn't a romantic answer. Wasn't even a particularly kind one. But it was honest, and Mei Lin found herself appreciating that more than pretty lies. What do you expect from me? She asked quietly. Don't steal from me. Don't lie to me. Pull your weight. He looked at her again, and this time there was something almost gentle in his eyes. And don't be afraid to speak up. I can't read minds. They rode in silence again after that, but it felt different somehow, less suffocating. When they finally reached the ranch, Mei Lin felt her stomach drop. She'd expected, she didn't know what. Something rough and barely standing, maybe? A shack. But this was a real house. Not big, not fancy, but solid. Wood planks painted white, a porch with a railing, windows with actual glass. Behind it stood a barn and several corrals where horses grazed. Caleb stopped the wagon. Home. He helped her down, again, lifting her like she weighed nothing, and grabbed her small bundle of belongings. I'll show you around. The inside of the house was sparse but clean. One main room with a kitchen area, table, and chairs. A fireplace. 2 doors leading to what must be bedrooms. You'll take that one. Caleb pointed to the left door. I'm on the right. Kitchen needs work. I'm not much of a cook. There's a well out back for water. Chickens in the coop need feeding every morning. Laundry on Mondays, usually. He was listing chores. This was a business arrangement to him. Mei Lin felt something in her chest unclench slightly. She could do chores. Chores she understood. The town, she started. How often do we go back? Once a month for supplies. Less, if I can help it. Thank God. The thought of facing those people again made her want to crawl into a hole. Caleb set her bundle on the table. You hungry? She realized she was starving, hadn't eaten since yesterday afternoon. Yes. He pulled out bread, cheese, and some dried meat. Not a fancy meal, but more food than she usually ate in a day. They sat at the table, and Mei Lin tried not to wolf it down. You worked in a laundry, Caleb said. It wasn't a question. Yes, with my uncle. That's hard work. It is. This'll be hard too. Different hard. He leaned back in his chair. I run cattle. Right now I've got about 50 head, but I'm trying to build the herd. Means long days. Means sometimes I'm gone overnight checking fence lines or tracking strays. Means you'll be here alone. The thought terrified and relieved her in equal measure. I can handle it, she said, hoping it was true. Caleb studied her face. Maybe you can. He stood up. I've got work to do. You settle in, figure out where things are. We'll talk more at supper. Then he was gone, the door closing behind him, leaving Mei Lin alone in this strange house that was apparently hers now. She sat at the table for a long time, just breathing, processing. Her whole life had changed in 24 hours. She'd gone from living in a cramped laundry room to this. From being alone to being married. From being the lowest person in Red Hollow to being, what? The wife of the most feared man around? Eventually she got up and explored. Her bedroom was small but had a real bed with a mattress, not a mat on the floor. There was a dresser, empty and waiting. A window that looked out over the prairie. She unpacked her bundle. It didn't take long, she owned so little. A change of clothes, a comb, a small box with the few coins she'd managed to save. A letter from her mother written 2 years ago that she'd read so many times the paper was falling apart. Mei Lin sat on the bed. It was softer than anything she'd slept on in years. She lay back, staring at the ceiling, and let herself feel the weight of everything. She was married to a stranger, living in the middle of nowhere, belonging to a world that didn't want her. But for the first time in 6 years, she had a room with a door that closed, a bed that didn't smell like other people's sweat, space that was hers. It wasn't much, but maybe it was something. The first week was strange. Caleb left early every morning and came back at dusk, dusty and exhausted. Maylin spent her days figuring out the house, the chickens, the routines. She tried to cook and mostly failed. Her uncle had never taught her much beyond rice and simple vegetables. The first time she attempted to make biscuits, they came out hard as rocks. Caleb bit into one at supper, his jaw working. He chewed for a very long time. "Well?" Maylin asked, bracing herself. He swallowed with effort. "They're dense. They're terrible. I've had worse." He took another bite, which she suspected was a lie to be kind. "You'll get better." She did, slowly. Learned that the oven ran hot, that the flour needed sifting, that Caleb would eat basically anything without complaint, which helped with her confidence. They didn't talk much. Meals were quiet affairs. Caleb wasn't a conversationalist. But he wasn't cruel either. When she accidentally burned her hand on the stove, he wordlessly brought her salve. When she couldn't reach something on a high shelf, he got it without her having to ask. Small things, simple things, but they mattered. On the 8th day, Maylin was hanging laundry when she heard hoofbeats. She turned to see a rider approaching, a woman on a bay mare, riding like she owned the world. The woman dismounted near the porch. She was beautiful in that sharp, predatory way some women were. Blonde hair, expensive-looking dress, eyes that took in everything and judged it wanting. "You must be the new Mrs. Rourke," she said, her smile not reaching her eyes. Maylin's stomach tightened. "Yes. I'm Margaret Dalton, the sheriff's daughter." She said it like it explained everything. "Thought I'd come by and welcome you to the neighborhood." This was not a welcome visit. Maylin could feel the malice radiating off this woman like heat from a stove. "Thank you," Maylin said carefully. Margaret looked around the property with obvious disdain. "Must be quite a change from the laundry, from washing white people's clothes to, well, to this." The insult was clear. Maylin felt her face flush. "Caleb around?" Margaret continued. "He's working." Pity." She turned her attention back to Maylin, looking her up and down like she was livestock. "I have to say, everyone in town is still shocked. Caleb Rourke could have had anyone. The school teacher was interested, and he chose you." Maylin's hands clenched around the wet shirt she was holding. "I suppose every man has his secrets," Margaret went on. "His peculiar tastes." The way she said it made Maylin's skin crawl. "Just seems like such a waste. A man like that, strong, with good land, tied to—" She waved a hand vaguely. "Well, Something hot and sharp rose in Maylin's chest. Anger, yes, but also something else. A refusal to be small anymore. "Is there a reason you came here?" Maylin asked, her voice steady despite her shaking hands. "Or did you ride all this way just to insult me on my own property?" Margaret's smile froze. "Excuse me?" "You heard me." For a moment, Margaret looked genuinely shocked, like the idea that Maylin might talk back had never occurred to her. Then her expression hardened. "You should watch yourself, China girl. This isn't your country. You're only here because Caleb made a mistake, and everyone knows it. Don't get comfortable. Women like you don't last long out here." She mounted her horse and rode off without another word, leaving Maylin standing there with wet laundry and a racing heart. That night, when Caleb came home, Maylin almost told him about the visit. But what would she say? That the sheriff's daughter had come by to remind her she didn't belong? He probably knew that already. Everyone did. So she stayed quiet, served supper, and pretended everything was fine. But something had shifted inside her. Margaret's words kept echoing in her head. "Women like you don't last long out here." Fine. Then she'd just have to prove them all wrong. The second week brought rain, not the gentle kind, but the mean sideways rain that found every crack in the walls and turned the yard into a mess of mud and standing water. Maylin spent 3 days trapped inside while the storm hammered the roof, and Caleb worked anyway, coming home soaked through and wordless with exhaustion. She watched him peel off his wet clothes by the door on the 3rd night, his movements stiff and careful. When he reached for the towel she'd left out, she saw him wince. "You're hurt." It's nothing. He dried his face, not looking at her. Let me see. I said it's nothing. But Mei Lin had grown up watching her mother tend to her father's injuries from the factory back when they'd all lived in the same cramped room in Guangdong. She recognized the particular way a man held himself when he was trying not to show pain. She walked over and reached for his shirt. Caleb went very still, his hand catching her wrist. Not hard, but firm enough to stop her. What are you doing? Checking to see if you're bleeding to death while lying to me about it. Something flickered across his face, surprise maybe, or the ghost of amusement. He let go of her wrist. My shoulder. Horse threw me into a fence post this morning. Mei Lin helped him ease the wet shirt off. The bruise spreading across his left shoulder and down his ribs was spectacular, deep purple, almost black in places. She sucked in a breath. You worked all day like this? Cattle don't care if I'm bruised. Sit down. I'm fine. Sit. Down. This time he obeyed, lowering himself into the chair with a grunt. Mei Lin fetched the salve he'd given her when she burned her hand along with a clean cloth. She started to apply it carefully, feeling the heat radiating from his skin. You don't have to do this, Caleb said quietly. You're my husband. You get hurt, I help. That's how it works. Is that how it worked in China? The question surprised her. He'd never asked about her life before. Never seemed interested. Yes, my mother took care of my father. My grandmother took care of my grandfather. Women take care of men. Men work until they break. She pressed gently around the worst of the bruising. It's the same everywhere, I think. Caleb was quiet while she worked. The rain drummed on the roof. The lamp flickered, making shadows dance on the walls. You miss it? He asked. China? Mei Lin had to think about that. I miss my family, my sister. But the place itself? She shook her head. We were so poor. My father worked 18 hours a day in a factory, and we still went hungry most nights. When my uncle wrote saying he needed help with the laundry, my parents sent me because keeping me alive was costing too much. She hadn't meant to say that last part. It just came out, raw and honest in the warm quiet of the house. I'm sorry, Caleb said. Don't be, it's just the truth. She finished applying the salve and stepped back. They did what they had to do, same as everyone. Caleb turned to look at her, and there was something in his eyes she hadn't seen before. Understanding, maybe. Recognition. My father sold me to a man when I was 14, he said. Gambling debt. The man owned a ranch in Texas, needed workers. I was property for 3 years until I got big enough to fight my way out. Mei Lin's hands went still. That's why you chose your land. Why you won't leave it. I'll never be property again. Never belong to someone else. He stood up carefully, testing the shoulder. And I'll never sell another human being, no matter what the law says is legal. The words hung between them, heavy with meaning Mei Lin was only starting to understand. He hadn't chosen her out of kindness or pity. He'd chosen her because he knew what it felt like to be the one nobody wanted, the one who got sold or sent away or forgotten. They were both unwanted things trying to survive in a world that had no use for them. Thank you, she said quietly. For the salve, for telling me. Caleb nodded once, then disappeared into his room. Mei Lin stood alone in the lamplight, feeling like something fundamental had shifted. They weren't friends, not yet, maybe not ever. But they weren't quite strangers anymore either. The rain stopped 2 days later, leaving everything green and fresh and impossibly muddy. Mei Lin was fighting with the chicken coop door, swollen from all the moisture, when she heard the wagon. Not Caleb. He'd ridden out on horseback at dawn. This was someone else. She turned to see a wagon rolling up the path, driven by a man she didn't recognize. Beside him sat a woman about Mei Lin's age, dark-haired and pretty, in a wholesome, unremarkable way. 2 children bounced in the back, a boy and a girl, maybe 6 and 8 years old. The man pulled the wagon to a stop and climbed down. He was built solid, with a farmer's thick hands and a face that had spent too much time in the sun. You must be Mrs. Rourke, he called out, friendly enough. I'm Daniel Cooper. This is my wife, Sarah, and those are our kids, Emma and Jacob. Sarah waved from the wagon seat, her smile genuine. We're your nearest neighbors, about 5 miles east. Thought we'd come by and introduce ourselves, seeing as we heard Caleb finally got himself a wife. Neighbors. The word felt strange. Mei Lin had lived in Red Hollow for 6 years and never had neighbors who actually talked to her. "Come in," she said, gesturing to the house. "I can make tea or coffee. I have coffee." "Tea would be lovely," Sarah said, climbing down with practiced ease. She had the kind of capable, no-nonsense air that Mei Lin immediately appreciated. "Kids, stay out of trouble." Inside, Mei Lin busied herself with the kettle while Sarah settled at the table. Daniel stayed outside with the children, and through the window, Mei Lin could see him examining Caleb's corrals with the assessing eye of someone who knew horses. "Don't mind him," Sarah said. "He's been wanting to talk cattle with Caleb for months, but your husband's not exactly the socializing type." "No, he's not. Can't say I blame him." Sarah accepted the tea with a grateful smile. "This town hasn't been particularly welcoming to outsiders, and Caleb's about as outside as they come. Plus all those stories." "What stories?" Sarah looked uncomfortable. "Oh, the usual gossip, that he killed a man in Texas, that he was a criminal on the run, that he's dangerous." She paused. "Is he? Dangerous?" Mei Lin thought about that, about the way Caleb had lifted her into the wagon like she weighed nothing, about his careful stillness, the way he moved through space like a predator, about the things he'd told her about his past. "Probably," she said honestly, "but not to me." "Good enough." Sarah sipped her tea. "For what it's worth, I think what he did, choosing you at the gathering, took guts. Made everyone real uncomfortable, which is always entertaining. Margaret Dalton about had a fit. She came by last week. Oh, Lord, what did she want?" "To remind me I don't belong here." Sarah's expression hardened. "Margaret's a snake, always has been. She had her sights set on Caleb for a while. Thought being the sheriff's daughter meant she could have any man she wanted. When he didn't even look at her, it about killed her pride." She leaned forward. "Don't let her get to you. Half this town is full of miserable people who make themselves feel better by making others feel worse." It was the most direct kindness anyone had shown Mei Lin since she'd arrived in America. She felt her throat tighten. "Thank you," she managed. "Us outsiders have to stick together." Sarah grinned. "I'm from Kentucky originally. Married Daniel against my daddy's wishes and moved out here when we were barely 20. This place can be hard and mean and unforgiving, but it's also got space to breathe, Nobody back in Kentucky would have let me run my own life. Here I can." They talked for another hour about chickens and gardens and the best way to get mud stains out of children's clothes. Normal things, easy things. By the time the Coopers left, Mei Lin felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Not quite hope, but maybe the shape of it. Caleb came home at dusk, covered in trail dust and leading a horse that looked half wild. He tied it to the corral fence and stood watching it with his arms crossed. "New one?" Mei Lin asked from the porch. "Found her running wild about 10 miles north. Somebody's lost mare." He didn't look away from the horse. "Or abandoned. She's skittish as hell. Will you sell her?" "Maybe. Or break her for riding. Depends." He finally turned to look at Mei Lin. "Coopers came by?" Yes. How did you know?" "Saw their wagon tracks." He climbed the porch steps. "Sarah's good people. Daniel talks too much, but he's honest. Their kids steal apples from my trees sometimes, but I let them." The casual admission surprised her. Caleb, the man everyone feared, let neighborhood children steal his apples. "They invited us for dinner next month," Mei Lin said. Caleb's expression didn't change. "We going?" "I'd like to, if that's all right." "It's all right." That night after supper, Caleb did something unexpected. Instead of disappearing into his room like usual, he pulled out a deck of cards. "You know how to play poker?" Mei Lin blinked. "No." "I'll teach you." He started shuffling with practiced ease. "Gets boring out here with nothing to do after dark." So he taught her. Patiently explained the rules, the hands, the strategy. Mei Lin was terrible at first, couldn't keep track of what beat what. But Caleb didn't get frustrated, just kept explaining until it started to click. They played for matches instead of money. By the end of the night, Caleb had won most of them, but Mei Lin had managed to take a few hands through what she suspected was more luck than skill. "You're not bad," Caleb said, gathering up the cards. "For a beginner." "You're a terrible liar," Mei Lin replied. and was rewarded with something that might have been a smile. It became a routine. After supper, cards, sometimes poker, sometimes other games Caleb knew. They didn't talk much during these games, but the silence felt comfortable now instead of oppressive. Maylin found herself looking forward to it, this quiet ritual that made the long evenings pass faster. 3 weeks into the marriage, Maylin woke to the sound of breaking glass. She sat up in bed, heart pounding. It was the middle of the night, pitch black except for moonlight through the window. Another crash, this time from the main room. Maylin grabbed the shawl from her bedpost and crept to her door, opened it a crack. The main room was chaos. Caleb stood in the middle of it, bare-chested, breathing hard. One of the kitchen chairs was overturned. The lamp from the table lay shattered on the floor. His hands were clenched into fists, and even in the dim light, Maylin could see he was shaking. "Caleb!" He spun toward her voice, and for just a second his eyes looked wild, empty, like he didn't recognize her. Then he blinked, and the wildness faded. "Get back in your room." "What happened?" "I said get back." His voice cracked. He turned away from her, pressing his palms against his eyes. "Please, just go back to bed." But Maylin had seen that look before. Her father used to get it sometimes, after particularly bad days at the factory. The look of a man trapped somewhere else, somewhere terrible. She stepped into the room. "You had a nightmare." "It's none of your concern." "You're my husband. That makes it my concern." She moved closer, careful, like approaching a spooked horse. "Was it the war?" Caleb's shoulders tensed. For a long moment he didn't answer, then quietly, "Yes." "Which one?" "Does it matter? They're all the same. Men killing men over things that don't matter, for people who don't care." He finally lowered his hands. "I killed a lot of people in those years. Sometimes I dream about them, about the things we did." Maylin thought about her own nightmares, the ones where she was back in Guangdong, watching her sister's face disappear as the ship pulled away from the dock. The ones where her mother was crying and Maylin couldn't reach her. Everyone carried ghosts. "My mother used to make tea," she said, "special kind with herbs. She said it helped my father sleep when the factory dreams got bad." She paused. "I don't have the same herbs here, but I could try something else, if you want." Caleb looked at her like he was trying to figure out if she was real. "Why would you do that?" "Because you helped me when I burned my hand, because you taught me poker, because we're stuck with each other, and I'd rather be stuck with someone who sleeps through the night." This time he definitely smiled. Small, barely there, but real. "All right," he said. "Make your tea." While the water boiled, Caleb cleaned up the broken glass and righted the chair. Maylin found some chamomile and mint. Not the right herbs, but close enough. When it was ready, they sat at the table like they did for their card games. "Tell me something," Caleb said, wrapping his hands around the cup. "Something true." "About what?" "Anything. Just talk. I need to hear a voice that's not in my head." So Maylin talked. Told him about her sister, who was probably 12 now, who loved to draw pictures in the dirt with sticks. About her grandmother, who had tiny bound feet and a laugh that sounded like wind chimes. About the boat journey from China, how she'd been sick the entire time, how she'd thought she might die before ever seeing America. "When I got here," she said, "my uncle met me at the port in San Francisco. I barely recognized him. He'd left China when I was 5. He looked so old, so tired, and I remember thinking, this is what America does to us. It uses us up and throws us away." "Is that still what you think?" Caleb asked. Maylin considered. "Sometimes. But then I think about having my own room, about learning to make biscuits that don't break teeth, about having someone teach me poker." She looked at him directly. "About being chosen instead of sent away." Something shifted in Caleb's expression. He set down the cup. "I'm glad I chose you," he said. "I know I said it was to spite Dalton, and that was part of it, but also—" He trailed off, searching for words. "You looked like you understood what it feels like to be the one nobody wants. And I thought, maybe that's better than choosing someone who'd expect things I can't give." "What things?" "Romance, love, the fairy tale version of marriage." He met her eyes. "I'm not good at those things. I'm hard to live with. I got nightmares and a temper and days where I can't stand to be around people. I'm not going to write you poetry or bring you flowers or any of that." "I don't want poetry," Mei Lin said. "I want someone who doesn't treat me like I'm invisible, who doesn't throw water on my feet or call me China girl like it's a curse. You've given me more respect in 3 weeks than Red Hollow gave me in 6 years." Caleb nodded slowly. "Then maybe we can make this work. Not as a love story, but as something else. A partnership." "Yeah, that." They finished the tea in comfortable silence. When Caleb finally went back to bed, Mei Lin lay awake thinking about the word he'd used. Partnership. It wasn't romance, but maybe it was better. Maybe it was real. The next morning, Caleb was already gone when she woke. But on the kitchen table, he'd left a handful of wildflowers in a cup. Not poetry, not a grand gesture, just wildflowers. Mei Lin smiled and got to work. The weeks rolled into a month, and Mei Lin found a rhythm to life on the ranch. Wake at dawn, feed the chickens, make breakfast. While Caleb worked with the cattle or mended fences, she tackled the endless chores: laundry, cooking, cleaning, tending the small vegetable garden she'd started. The work was hard, but different from the laundry. This work had visible results. She could see the garden growing, the house getting more organized, the meals improving. She was getting stronger too. Her hands, already calloused from years of washing clothes, developed new calluses from different work. Her arms didn't ache after carrying water from the well anymore. She learned to kill and pluck chickens without flinching, learned which plants were edible and which would make you sick. Caleb taught her things without making it feel like teaching, showed her how to read weather in the clouds, how to tell if a horse was favoring a leg, how to shoot the rifle he kept above the door. "You're out here alone sometimes," he said, setting up targets behind the barn. "You should know how to protect yourself." The rifle was heavier than Mei Lin expected. The first shot nearly knocked her over, and she missed the target by 3 feet. "Terrible," Caleb said. "I know. Try again." She did, and again, and again. By the time the sun started setting, she could hit the target more often than not. Her shoulder would be bruised tomorrow from the recoil, but she felt something like pride. "Better," Caleb said, taking the rifle. "Few more weeks, you might actually hit what you're aiming at." "Your encouragement is overwhelming." He almost laughed. Mei Lin was learning to recognize his almost laughs, the slight exhale, the tiny shift in his expression. They counted. That night during their card game, Caleb said, "We need to go into town next week. Supplies are low." Mei Lin's hands tightened on her cards. "Can't you go alone?" "I could, but people already talk. You never showing your face just gives them more to gossip about." He laid down his hand, 3 of a kind. "Besides, you're my wife. You belong there as much as anyone." "I don't want to go." "I know." He gathered up the cards. "But we're going anyway." Mei Lin wanted to argue, but she saw the logic. Hiding here forever wasn't sustainable. And maybe Caleb was right. Maybe showing up as his wife, as Mrs. Rourke instead of just the China girl, would change something. Or maybe it would make everything worse. The night before they were supposed to go, Mei Lin couldn't sleep. She lay in bed listening to the sounds of the house settling, the distant cry of a coyote, her own racing thoughts. Finally, she gave up and went to the main room. Caleb was there, sitting at the table in lamplight. He looked up when she entered. "Can't sleep either?" he asked. "Tomorrow has me nervous." "Me too." That surprised her. "You get nervous?" "People make me nervous. Crowds make me nervous. Towns make me nervous. I'd rather face down a whole herd of stampeding cattle than walk through Red Hollow's main street." He gestured to the chair across from him. "But we do it anyway." Mei Lin sat. "Why?" "Because the alternative is letting them win. Letting them make us so small we disappear." He was quiet for a moment. "When I was 14, working that ranch in Texas, I used to dream about disappearing. Thought if I could just make myself invisible enough, quiet enough, maybe the owner would forget I existed and I could slip away. But you know what I learned? Making yourself invisible just makes it easier for people to hurt you. They can't see you fighting back. So we show up. So we show up." The next morning, Mei Lin dressed carefully. Not her best dress. She was saving that for something that mattered more. But clean clothes, hair neatly braided, The few pieces of simple jewelry her mother had given her before she left China. Armor made of cotton and jade. Caleb hitched up the wagon. Neither of them spoke much on the ride in. The land rolled past, familiar now. Mei Lin could name landmarks, the bent oak tree, the creek that ran dry in summer, the place where Caleb said he'd once seen a black bear. Red Hollow appeared on the horizon, and Mei Lin's stomach clenched. They rode down the main street. People stopped to stare. Conversations died mid-sentence. Mei Lin kept her eyes forward, her spine straight. She was Mrs. Rourke now. She belonged here, even if nobody believed it yet. Caleb stopped the wagon in front of the general store. "I'll get the supplies." "You want to wait here or come in?" Coming in meant facing the store owner who'd once refused to sell her uncle nails because he didn't serve Chinamen. Staying outside meant sitting in the wagon like a child while people gawked. Both options were terrible. "I'll come in," Mei Lin said. The store was dim and crowded with goods, fabric bolts, tools, bags of flour and sugar, jars of preserves. Mr. Henderson stood behind the counter, and his expression when he saw them could have curdled milk. "Rourke," he said, not quite managing to keep the distaste from his voice. "Henderson." Caleb pulled out his list. "Need these supplies. Can you have them ready in an hour?" Henderson's eyes slid to Mei Lin, then back to Caleb. "Didn't expect to see you bringing her into town. She's my wife. Where else would she be?" "I just meant—" "I know what you meant." Caleb's voice dropped, went cold in a way that made Mei Lin's breath catch. "And I'm telling you I don't care. Fill my order. Take my money. Keep your opinions to yourself." Henderson's face went red, but he nodded. "Hour, you said?" "Hour." They walked out. Mei Lin felt like her heart might beat out of her chest. On the boardwalk, Caleb stopped and looked at her. "You all right?" "I think so." "Want to get a coffee at the hotel, or would you rather wait at the wagon?" The hotel, where people would see her, where she'd have to sit in public, drinking coffee like she had a right to be there. Every instinct screamed to hide, but Caleb was watching her with those patient, unreadable eyes, and she remembered what he'd said. Making yourself invisible just makes it easier for people to hurt you. "Coffee," she said. "Let's get coffee." The hotel restaurant was half full. Conversation stopped when they entered. Mei Lin felt every eye in the room lock onto her. Caleb walked to a table near the window like he owned the place, pulled out a chair for Mei Lin, sat down across from her and signaled the waitress like this was the most normal thing in the world. The waitress, young, blonde, clearly uncomfortable, approached slowly. "Mr. Rourke, what can I get you?" "2 coffees, pie if you have any that's fresh." We have apple." "Fine." The waitress scurried away. Around them, people were trying not to stare while absolutely staring. Mei Lin wrapped her hands together under the table to keep them from shaking. "Look at me," Caleb said quietly. She did. "Not at them. At me. They don't matter. They're all watching. Let them watch. They were going to talk anyway. Might as well give them something to talk about." The coffee came. The pie came. Caleb ate his slowly, methodically, like he had all the time in the world. Mei Lin forced herself to do the same, even though her throat felt tight and her stomach was doing flips. Halfway through the pie, Margaret Dalton walked in. Of course she did. Margaret's eyes found them immediately. For a moment she looked genuinely shocked. Then her face settled into that mean, beautiful smile. She walked over to their table. "Caleb, how nice to see you in town." "Margaret. And you're—" She looked at Mei Lin like she was something stuck to her shoe. "Wife. How domestic." "Is there something you need?" Caleb asked, his tone making it clear she should move along. "Just being neighborly." Margaret's smile widened. "Though I have to say I'm surprised to see you here, in public, with her. Most men keep their mistakes private." The words hit like a slap. Mei Lin felt her face burn. But before she could respond, Caleb set down his fork, looked up at Margaret with an expression so cold it could freeze water. "My wife," he said, each word deliberate, "is not a mistake. She's not private. She's not something to be ashamed of. She's sitting right here, drinking coffee in this hotel, because she has every right to be here, same as you, same as anyone." Margaret's smile faltered. "Now, unless you have actual business with us, Caleb continued. "I suggest you move along. We're trying to enjoy our pie." For a moment, Margaret just stood there, her face cycling through emotions: shock, anger, humiliation. Then she spun on her heel and walked out, her skirt swishing with barely contained rage. The restaurant was dead silent. Then someone near the back started clapping, slow at first, then faster. Sarah Cooper, sitting with her husband, grinning like she'd just witnessed the best show of her life. A few other people joined in, not many, but enough. Enough to crack the silence. Enough to make Mei Lin realize that not everyone in Red Hollow hated her. Caleb picked up his fork and went back to his pie like nothing had happened. Mei Lin stared at him. "You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did. She's the sheriff's daughter. You just humiliated her in front of half the town." "Good. Maybe she'll think twice before running her mouth next time." He took a sip of coffee. "Finish your pie. We got supplies to collect." Mei Lin looked down at her plate. The pie was good, sweet and tart at the same time. She took another bite, and this time it didn't stick in her throat. Around them, conversations slowly resumed, but they were different now, quieter, more careful. Something had shifted. Mei Lin had walked into this hotel as the Chinese laundry girl pretending to be someone's wife. She was walking out as Mrs. Caleb Rourke. And for the first time since arriving in Red Hollow 6 years ago, she felt like maybe, just maybe, she could actually be that person. They loaded the supplies in silence, Caleb handling the heavy sacks while Mei Lin organized the smaller items in the wagon bed. Her hands were still shaking slightly from the confrontation at the hotel, but it was a different kind of shaking now. Not fear exactly, something closer to electricity. "You're smiling," Caleb observed, hefting a bag of flour into place. Mei Lin touched her face, surprised to find he was right. "I am." "First time someone stood up for you?" "First time someone stood up for me and made Margaret Dalton look like a fool." She arranged the coffee tins in a neat row. "That felt good. Don't get used to it. I'm not in the habit of making scenes." "Could have fooled me." Caleb almost smiled, then went still, his eyes fixed on something over Mei Lin's shoulder. "We got company." Mei Lin turned to see Sheriff Dalton approaching, his deputy trailing behind him. The sheriff's face was red, his jaw set. This wasn't a friendly visit. "Rourke?" Dalton said, his voice carrying across the street. "Need a word." "I'm busy." "Wasn't a request." Caleb straightened to his full height, which put him a good 4 inches taller than Dalton. "Then make it quick." "My daughter came home upset, says you embarrassed her in front of half the town." "Your daughter came to my table uninvited and insulted my wife. I asked her to leave. If that embarrassed her, maybe she should learn some manners." Dalton's face got redder. "You watch your tone. I'm still the law here." "Then act like it. Instead of letting your daughter run around town treating people like trash because she thinks her daddy's badge gives her the right." The deputy's hand moved toward his gun. Caleb noticed. Of course he noticed, but didn't flinch. Just stood there, calm and immovable as stone. "You're walking a thin line," Dalton said quietly. "I'm standing in the street, loading my wagon, minding my own business. If that's a crime, arrest me." Mei Lin held her breath. Around them, people had stopped to watch. The tension was thick enough to choke on. Dalton's hand rested on his own gun, and for a terrible moment Mei Lin thought this was going to turn into something violent. Then Sarah Cooper's voice cut through the silence. "Sheriff, just the man I was looking for." Sarah hurried over, her husband Daniel close behind. She positioned herself between Caleb and Dalton with the kind of deliberate casualness that said she knew exactly what she was doing. "We've been having trouble with coyotes getting into our chicken coop," Sarah said brightly. "Daniel thinks we need to set traps, but I'm worried about the children. You have any advice?" Dalton looked like he wanted to ignore her, but too many people were watching now. He couldn't make a scene without looking like the aggressor. "Build a better fence," he said shortly. "Oh, we tried that. Didn't we, Daniel?" 3 times, Daniel confirmed, moving to stand next to Caleb in a show of solidarity that wasn't lost on anyone. "Damn coyotes just dig under it." "Maybe get a dog," the deputy offered, clearly uncomfortable with the whole situation. "Now there's an idea," Sarah said. "Caleb, don't you have that dog that had puppies last spring?" Caleb caught on. "Yeah, got one left, actually. Runt of the litter, but smart." The conversation shifted, became about dogs and fences and coyotes, normal frontier problems. The violence that had been building in the air dissipated like smoke. After a few more minutes, Dalton gave Caleb one last hard look and walked away, the deputy following. Sarah waited until they were out of earshot, then let out a long breath. That was close. Too close, Daniel agreed. He looked at Caleb. Dalton's been looking for an excuse to come after you for years. You just handed him one. I didn't do anything wrong. Doesn't matter. You made his daughter cry in public. That's enough for a man like him. Daniel glanced at Mei Lin, then back to Caleb. You might want to keep a low profile for a while. Stay out of town. I'm not hiding from him. I'm not saying hide. I'm saying be smart. Daniel lowered his voice. Word is he's been talking to the territorial marshal, trying to find something to use against you, any excuse to run you out of Red Hollow. Caleb's expression hardened. He can try. Stubborn as a damn mule, Sarah muttered. She turned to Mei Lin. You coming to dinner next week? If we're still invited? Of course you are. Bring whatever you want. We'll make a proper evening of it. Sarah smiled warmly. And don't worry about Dalton. He's all bark, mostly. The Coopers left and Caleb finished loading the wagon in silence. Mei Lin could see the tension in his shoulders, the tight set of his jaw. This wasn't over. On the ride home, neither of them spoke for the first hour. The wagon rattled along the dirt road, the sun climbing higher, turning the world bright and harsh. Finally, Mei Lin said, You didn't have to defend me like that. In the hotel. Yes, I did. It made things worse. Caleb's hands tightened on the reins. You think letting Margaret talk to you like that would have made things better? You think rolling over and taking it would have earned their respect? He shook his head. I learned something a long time ago. People like Dalton, like Margaret, they don't respect weakness. They feed on it. Only thing they understand is strength. But now the sheriff's looking for ways to hurt you. He was already looking. This just gave him a reason to be more obvious about it. Caleb glanced at her. I knew what I was doing when I chose you, knew it would piss people off, knew it would make my life harder. Did it anyway. Why? Because some things are worth being difficult about. Mei Lin didn't know what to say to that, so she sat quietly, watching the land roll past, trying to understand this complicated man she'd married. The weeks that followed were tense. Caleb didn't go into town again, sent Mei Lin to the Cooper's place for the supplies they needed. The dinner at the Cooper's house was pleasant. Sarah was a good cook. The children were energetic and loud in that way children were. And Daniel and Caleb actually talked about cattle and horses and the land. But underneath the normalcy, there was an undercurrent of waiting, like the whole territory was holding its breath for the next bad thing to happen. It came on a Tuesday morning, 6 weeks after the confrontation in town. Mei Lin was in the garden pulling weeds when she heard the gunshot. Single crack, echoing across the prairie. She straightened, her heart hammering. Caleb had ridden out at dawn to check the north fence line. That shot had come from the north. She waited, listened. No more shots. That could be good or very, very bad. 20 minutes later, she saw the horse. Caleb's horse, running hard, riderless. The saddle was empty, the reins trailing. Mei Lin's blood went cold. She ran to the barn, grabbed the mare Caleb had been training, still half wild but the only other horse on the property, and somehow managed to get herself into the saddle. The mare danced sideways, sensing Mei Lin's panic, but she held on and kicked it into a run. She'd never ridden alone before, never ridden at more than a walk, but terror made her brave or stupid or both, and she pointed the mare north and held on as the world blurred past. She found Caleb a mile from the house, lying in the grass near the fence line. For a horrible second, she thought he was dead. Then he moved, pushing himself up onto one elbow. Mei Lin threw herself off the horse, nearly fell, caught herself, and ran to him. What happened? Are you shot? I'm fine. But his voice was tight with pain. There was blood on his leg, his pants torn. Horse threw me when the shot went off. Landed wrong. Who was shooting? Didn't see. They were up in those rocks. He gestured to an outcropping maybe 100 yards away. Took one shot, then rode off. Weren't trying to kill me. Just spooked the horse. Your leg. Think I broke it. Maybe just sprained. Hard to tell. He tried to stand, went white, and sat back down hard. Damn it. Maylin looked at the blood, the way his leg was bent slightly wrong. Broken. Definitely broken. And they were a mile from the house with 2 horses, one of which was barely trained, and the other that had run home. Can you ride? She asked. Not like this. Then I'll get the wagon. That'll take too long. Help me up. I can ride if you help me mount. It took 10 minutes and a lot of cursing, but they got Caleb onto the mare. Maylin climbed up behind him, wrapping her arms around his waist to keep him steady. The mare didn't like carrying double, but tolerated it, and they made their way slowly back to the ranch. Getting Caleb into the house was even harder. He was heavy and trying not to put weight on the bad leg, and every step made him grunt with pain. By the time Maylin got him into his bed, they were both sweating. I need to look at it, she said. It's fine. It's broken and bleeding. Let me see. Caleb closed his eyes, breathed hard through his nose, then nodded. Maylin carefully cut away his pant leg. The break wasn't compound, the bone hadn't come through the skin, but it was bad. Already swelling, turning purple. The bleeding was from where he'd landed on rocks, scraping his skin raw. Maylin had helped set her father's broken finger once back in China. That had been hard enough. This was worse. But sitting here doing nothing wasn't an option. This is going to hurt, she said. I know. She cleaned the scrapes first, using water and the whiskey Caleb kept for emergencies. He hissed through his teeth but didn't pull away. Then came the hard part. I need to straighten it, Maylin said, before it sets wrong. Caleb's hand gripped the bed frame. Do it. She pulled. Caleb made a sound like a wounded animal, his whole body going rigid. The bone shifted, and Maylin felt sick but kept going until it looked right. Then she splinted it using wood from the kindling box and strips torn from an old sheet, binding it tight. When she finished, Caleb was pale and breathing hard, sweat soaking through his shirt. Done, Maylin said quietly. You did good. His voice was rough. Real good. I'll get you water and something for the pain. Whiskey's fine. She brought him the bottle, and he took a long drink. Then another. His hands were shaking. Who do you think it was? Maylin asked. Who shot at you? Could be anyone. Could be Dalton's people. Could be someone else who doesn't like me. He took another drink. Could be someone trying to run me off my land. Happens out here. Somebody wants your property. Easiest way is to make you too scared to stay. Are you scared? Caleb looked at her with those steady, unreadable eyes. Terrified. But I'm not leaving. Over the next few days, Maylin learned what it meant to run a ranch alone. Caleb tried to help from bed, giving instructions, but he was mostly useless. The cattle needed checking, the horses needed feeding, the chickens still needed their daily care, the garden needed watering, and on top of all that, Caleb needed tending, food, water, help getting to the chamber pot, fresh bandages. Maylin worked from before dawn until after dark. Her body ached in new ways. Blisters formed on top of old calluses. She fell into bed each night so exhausted she couldn't even think. On the 4th day, Sarah Cooper showed up. Heard what happened? She said, climbing down from her wagon with a basket. Brought food, and help if you need it. Maylin could have cried with relief. Thank you. Sarah looked around the property with an assessing eye. You've been managing alone? Trying to. You're doing better than trying. Place looks good. She hefted the basket. Let's get this inside, and you can tell me what needs doing most. They worked together all day. Sarah helped with the heavy tasks Maylin couldn't manage alone, showed her tricks for moving efficiently, taught her how to check cattle for signs of illness without getting too close to their horns. By sunset, Maylin felt like she could breathe again. Daniel says people are talking, Sarah said as they sat on the porch, drinking water. About the shooting. Most think it was Dalton sending a message. Can we prove it? Doubtful. That's how men like him operate. Never get their own hands dirty. Sarah was quiet for a moment. You could leave, you know, both of you. Start over somewhere Dalton's reach doesn't extend. Maylin thought about that. Thought about packing up, moving on, finding someplace easier, safer. Then she thought about the garden she'd planted. The chickens that knew her voice, the room with the door that closed. The quiet evenings playing cards, the way Caleb had stood up for her in that hotel. No, she said. This is home now. Sarah smiled. Good. Because I'd hate to lose the only other sane woman within 20 miles. That night, after Sarah left, Mei Lin sat with Caleb while he ate the soup Sarah had brought. He was looking better, still pale, still in pain, but the worst of it had passed. Sarah said people think Dalton was behind the shooting, Mei Lin told him. Probably was. Doesn't that make you angry? Being angry doesn't change anything, just wastes energy. He set down the bowl. I learned that in the war. You can be angry at the bullets, angry at the officers, angry at the whole damn thing. Doesn't stop any of it, just eats you up inside. So what do? You survive, you adapt, you find a way to keep going. He looked at her directly. You're doing that better than I expected, honestly. You expected me to fall apart? I expected you to try. Didn't know if you'd succeed. Running a ranch isn't easy, even with two people. He paused. You've surprised me. Coming from Caleb, that was high praise. Mei Lin felt warmth spread through her chest. You've surprised me too, she said. I thought you'd be meaner, colder. Everyone says you're dangerous. I am dangerous. Not to me. Caleb was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was softer than usual. No, not to you. Something shifted between them in that moment. Not quite friendship, still not love. But something solid, something real. 2 weeks after the shooting, Caleb was up and moving on crutches he'd made himself. His leg was healing well, though he'd walk with a limp for months. He couldn't do heavy work yet, but he could sit a horse carefully and give directions. Mei Lin had taken over most of the daily operations. She'd gotten good at it, found a rhythm that worked. The ranch didn't fall apart. If anything, things ran smoother now that they'd figured out a better division of labor. They were both outside one afternoon, Caleb sitting on the porch watching Mei Lin work with the garden, when they saw riders approaching. 3 of them, coming fast. Caleb reached for the rifle leaning against the porch rail. Get inside. No. Mei Lin, I'm staying. She moved to stand next to him. We do this together. The riders got closer. Not Dalton's men. These were ranchers from the surrounding properties. Men Caleb knew by sight, but not by friendship. The lead rider pulled up his horse. His name was Jack Morrison, owned a spread about 15 miles west. He was older, weathered, with the kind of face that had seen too much sun and too little joy. Rourke, Morrison said by way of greeting. Morrison, something I can help you with? Actually, yeah. Morrison glanced at the other 2 riders, then back to Caleb. We got a problem. Cattle rustlers been hitting the area. Took 20 head from my place last week. Hit the Hendersons 2 nights ago. We're forming a group to track them down, and we could use someone who knows how to handle himself. Caleb's expression didn't change. Why me? Because you're former military. Because people say you can shoot. Because despite what the town thinks, some of us know you're not the problem around here. Morrison's jaw tightened. And because Dalton's men won't help, Sheriff says he doesn't have the resources to chase rustlers outside town limits. Convenient. That's what I thought. Morrison looked at Mei Lin, then back to Caleb. We're heading out tomorrow morning. Could use your help if you're willing. Caleb considered this. His leg wasn't fully healed. Tracking rustlers would be dangerous, potentially violent work, and leaving Mei Lin alone on the ranch after someone had already shot at him seemed like a terrible idea. I can't, Caleb said. She's leg's still healing, and I'm not leaving my wife here unprotected. Bring her to our place, one of the other riders said. Frank Henderson, the one who'd lost cattle 2 nights ago. My wife would be happy for the company. She can stay there while we're gone. I don't need... Mei Lin started, but Caleb cut her off. That could work. I can take care of myself here, Mei Lin protested. I know you can, but I'd feel better if you weren't alone. Caleb looked at Morrison. How long do you think we'll be gone? 3 days? Maybe 4? Caleb nodded slowly. All right, I'm in. After the riders left, Mei Lin rounded on him. You can barely walk without crutches, and you're going to chase cattle thieves? My leg's good enough for sitting a horse, and they need help. Why do you care? These are the same people who treat you like an outsider. Because rustlers don't just stop. They hit one ranch, they hit them all. Eventually they'll come here. Caleb's voice was firm. And because Morrison's right. If we don't look out for each other, nobody will. Dalton sure as hell won't. Mei Lin wanted to argue more, but she could see the logic, and she could see something else in Caleb's expression, a need to be useful, to do something that mattered. He'd been stuck in bed for 2 weeks, dependent on her for everything. This was him taking back some control. "Fine," she said, "but if you get yourself killed, I'm keeping the ranch." That got her an almost smile. "Deal." The next morning, Caleb loaded his rifle and enough supplies for 4 days. Maylin packed food, checked his leg bandages one more time, and tried not to let her worry show. "Stay at the Hendersons, Woke," Caleb said as he mounted his horse carefully. "Don't come back here alone." "I know. And if anything feels wrong, anything at all, you ride to the Coopers. Don't hesitate." "I know." He looked down at her, and for a moment his careful control slipped. She saw real concern there, real fear, not for himself, for her. "I'll be careful," he said quietly. "You better be." Then he rode off to join the other men, and Maylin watched until they disappeared over the ridge. She stood there for a long time after, feeling the weight of his absence like a physical thing. She'd lived alone for years in Red Hollow. Solitude wasn't new, but this felt different. This felt like missing someone. The Hendersons' ranch was bigger than Caleb's, more established, with a proper main house and several outbuildings. Mrs. Henderson, Martha, was a stout woman in her 50s with kind eyes and capable hands. She welcomed Maylin like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Don't get much company out here," Martha said, showing Maylin to a small guest room. "It'll be nice having another woman around for a few days." That first night, they had dinner with Martha's 2 teenage daughters. The girls were curious about Maylin in that open, guileless way teenagers could be. "Is it true Mr. Rourke chose you over Margaret Dalton?" the younger one asked. "Emily," Martha scolded. "What? Everyone's talking about it." "Yes," Maylin said simply. "It's true." That must have made her so mad. Emily grinned. "Good. Margaret's awful." "Emily." "Well, she is, Mama. Remember when she told Sarah Murphy her dress made her look fat right in front of everyone at church?" Martha sighed, but didn't argue. The conversation moved on to other topics. The coming harvest, plans for a barn raising next month, gossip about people Maylin didn't know. It was strange and pleasant at the same time, this normal family dinner. Maylin had forgotten what this felt like, sitting around a table with multiple people, the comfortable chaos of conversation. That night, lying in the unfamiliar bed, Maylin thought about Caleb, wondered where he was, if he was safe, if his leg was holding up. She'd known him for less than 2 months, but already the thought of something happening to him made her chest tight. When had that happened? When had he gone from a stranger she was forced to marry to someone she actually cared about? She didn't have an answer, just knew that somewhere between the poker games and the nightmares and the quiet moments of working side by side, something had changed. And she hoped, really hoped, that he'd come back. 3 days passed. Maylin helped Martha with chores, learned to can preserves, played games with the daughters. It was nice, but she felt restless. Kept looking toward the horizon, waiting. On the 4th day, just before sunset, the men rode back. Maylin saw them from the porch and ran, to meet them. Caleb was near the back of the group, looking exhausted and dirty and wonderfully alive. He dismounted carefully, favoring his bad leg, and Maylin stopped short a few feet away, suddenly unsure. They weren't the kind of people who hugged or showed affection openly, but Caleb looked at her, and something in his expression softened. "Miss me?" "The ranch was quieter without you," Maylin said, which was as close as she could get to admitting the truth. "We got 'em," Morrison said, riding up. "Caught the whole gang camped about 40 miles north, recovered most of the cattle. Sheriff's deputy is bringing them back to Red Hollow for trial." "Anyone hurt?" Martha asked, coming out to join them. "Few scrapes and bruises. Nothing serious." Morrison looked at Caleb. "Your husband's a hell of a shot, Mrs. Rourke. Took down 3 men's horses from 100 yards out without hitting the riders. Ended the fight before it really started." Maylin looked at Caleb, who shrugged like it was nothing. "Just did what needed doing." After the other men left, Maylin and Caleb made their way back to their own ranch in the last light of day. Caleb's horse knew the way, and they rode in comfortable silence. "How's your leg?" Maylin asked finally. "Sore, but it held up." "And the rustlers?" "Scared kids, mostly. Thought stealing cattle was easier than honest work. They learn different. He shifted in the saddle. Morrison and the others, they thanked me, said I was welcome at the next community gathering. First time anyone said that. You helped them. Of course they thanked you. It's more than that. I think... He trailed off, searching for words. I think maybe we're not outsiders anymore. Not completely. Maylin thought about that. About Martha's kindness, about Sarah's friendship, about the way Morrison had asked for Caleb's help instead of treating him like a threat. Maybe we're not, she agreed. When they reached the ranch, the house looked the same as always, small and solid and waiting. But walking through the door felt different this time. Felt like coming home, not just to a place, but to something bigger. Caleb collapsed into his chair with a groan. I'm getting too old for this. You're not old. Feel old. Feel like I've been trampled by horses. Maylin heated water for tea and started pulling together something for supper from what was left in the cupboards. They'd need to go into town for supplies soon, but that could wait. I was thinking, Caleb said from his chair, about next month. There's a harvest dance in town, community thing. Usually I don't go, but... He looked at her. Thought maybe we should, together. Maylin's hand stilled on the pot. You want to go to a dance? I want people to see us together, as a real married couple, not just... He gestured vaguely. Whatever they think this is. I don't know how to dance. Not American dancing. Neither do I, really. We'll figure it out. He smiled, small but genuine. Besides, it would drive Margaret Dalton crazy. That's worth the price of admission. Maylin laughed despite herself. When you put it that way, so we're going? She thought about it. About walking into a town gathering as Mrs. Rourke, on Caleb's arm, showing everyone that she belonged. The idea terrified her, but it also felt right, felt like the next step. We're going, she said. And just like that, the decision was made. The weeks before the harvest dance crawled by with agonizing slowness. Maylin found herself obsessing over details she'd never cared about before. What to wear, how to fix her hair, whether she should try to learn the steps beforehand or just wing it and hope for the best. Sarah came by one afternoon with fabric bundled under her arm, her eyes bright with excitement. I heard you're going to the dance, she said, spreading the cloth across Maylin's kitchen table. And I thought, well, you can't show up in your everyday dress. So I brought this. It was supposed to be for me, but honestly, it'll look better on you. The fabric was beautiful, deep blue, the color of the sky just after sunset. Maylin ran her fingers over it, feeling the smooth texture. I can't take this. You're not taking it. I'm giving it. There's a difference. Sarah pulled out a measuring tape. Now hold still. We've got work to do. Over the next week, Sarah came by 3 times to help with the dress. Maylin had basic sewing skills from mending clothes at the laundry, but this was different. This required precision, an eye for fit and style that she didn't have. You're nervous, Sarah observed one afternoon, pinning the hem. Is it that obvious? Only completely. Sarah sat back on her heels. You know you don't have to go if you don't want to. Nobody's forcing you. Caleb wants to go. That's not what I asked. Maylin was quiet for a moment, thinking. I want to go. I think, but I also don't want to give them another reason to stare at me, to whisper. They're going to whisper anyway. That's what people do. Sarah stuck another pin in place. But here's the thing. You're not the same woman who stood in that square 2 months ago. You've been running a ranch. You set Caleb's broken leg by yourself. You stood up to Margaret Dalton's venom and didn't back down. Those people might still whisper, but now they know you're not someone they can push around. I don't feel strong. Nobody does. We just pretend until it becomes real. Sarah smiled. Trust me, half the women in Red Hollow are terrified of you now. That's ridiculous. Is it? You married the scariest man in the territory, and instead of wilting under the pressure, you thrived. That scares people who've been playing it safe their whole lives. Maylin hadn't thought about it that way. She'd been so focused on her own fear, her own inadequacy, that she hadn't considered how others might see her. The dress was finished 3 days before the dance. When Maylin tried it on, Sarah actually gasped. Oh, that's perfect. Maylin looked at herself in the small mirror Caleb kept in his room. The blue brought out the black of her hair, and the cut made her look taller, more substantial. not invisible, not trying to disappear. I look different, she said. You look like yourself. Just the version of yourself that doesn't apologize for existing. That night, Maylin showed Caleb the dress. He'd been in the barn checking on a pregnant mare, and when he came in, she was standing in the main room wearing it. He stopped dead in the doorway. Well? Maylin asked, suddenly self-conscious. Caleb's expression was unreadable. He looked at her for a long moment, then said quietly, You look beautiful. It was the first time he'd said anything like that to her. Maylin felt heat rise to her face. You don't have to. I'm not saying it to be nice. I'm saying it because it's true. He hung his hat on the hook by the door. You should wear your hair down for the dance. Down? Yeah, it looks good down. Maylin touched her braid self-consciously. She always wore it up, practical and out of the way. The idea of wearing it loose felt almost scandalous. I'll think about it, she said. The night before the dance, Caleb taught her the basic steps in their main room. He pushed the table against the wall to make space, and they stood facing each other in the lamplight. I'm not good at this, Caleb warned, but I know enough not to embarrass you. He took her hand, placed his other hand on her waist. The contact made Maylin's breath catch. They'd touched before, when she'd tended his wounds, when he'd helped her onto the wagon, but this felt different, more intentional. The man leads, Caleb said. You just follow, left foot back when I step forward, right when I go left. It's a pattern. He started moving, and Maylin tried to follow, stepped on his foot immediately. Sorry. It's fine. Try again. They stumbled through it, Maylin concentrating so hard she forgot to breathe. But gradually, slowly, she started to feel the rhythm, started to anticipate his movements. Better, Caleb said. Now don't look at your feet. Look at me. Maylin lifted her eyes, found herself staring directly into his face, close enough to see the scar above his left eyebrow, the gray mixed into his dark stubble, the way the lamplight caught in his eyes. There, he said softly. Now you've got it. They moved around the small room, the floorboards creaking under their feet. It wasn't graceful. Maylin still missed steps, still felt clumsy and uncertain. But Caleb was patient, guiding her through the movements, his hand steady on her waist. Why are you doing this? Maylin asked. Really, it's not just about making a statement to the town, is it? Caleb was quiet for a few steps. Then, when I was property, when I worked that ranch in Texas, I used to watch the owner's family sometimes. They'd have parties, dances, people dressed nice, laughing, dancing like they didn't have a care in the world. And I remember thinking how much I wanted that. Not the fancy clothes or the big house, just the freedom to do something because it made you happy, not because someone forced you. He spun her carefully, brought her back. I want you to have that, he continued. A night where you're not the laundry girl or the outsider or someone's obligation, just a woman at a dance with her husband. Maylin's throat felt tight. You're not what people say you are. What do people say? That you're cold, dangerous, that you don't care about anyone. I am dangerous, and I don't care about most people. His hand tightened slightly on hers. But I care about some people, more than I thought I would. The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. Maylin knew what he was saying without saying it directly, that she'd become one of those people, that somewhere in the past 2 months she'd gone from a stranger to someone who mattered. I care about you too, she said quietly, in case that wasn't obvious. Caleb smiled, a real smile this time, not just the ghost of one. It wasn't, but I'm glad. They danced until the lamp oil ran low, practicing until Maylin's feet ached and she could do the steps without thinking. When they finally stopped, both breathing hard, Caleb kept holding her hand. You'll be fine tomorrow, he said. Better than fine. We'll be fine, Maylin corrected. Together. Together, he agreed. The day of the harvest dance dawned clear and cool, the kind of autumn day that made everything feel crisp and possible. Maylin woke early and found Caleb already up, shaving carefully at the basin. She'd never seen him shave before. He usually just let his beard grow and trimmed it occasionally with scissors. Big day, she said from the doorway. Want to look presentable. He wiped the razor clean. Figure if we're going to make a statement, might as well commit to it. They spent the morning doing regular chores. Cattle still needed checking, chickens still needed feeding. But there was an undercurrent of anticipation that made everything feel slightly unreal. In the afternoon, Maylin heated water for a bath. She washed her hair carefully, using the nice soap Sarah had given her. Then came the dress, the careful process of buttoning and adjusting until everything sat right. She left her hair down. When she emerged from her room, Caleb was already dressed in clothes she'd never seen him wear. Dark pants, a white shirt that actually fit properly, a vest that looked almost formal. He'd cleaned his boots until they shined. He stared at her hair. "Is it too much?" Maylin asked, suddenly uncertain. "No, it's perfect." He grabbed his hat, then paused. "Ready?" "No, but let's go anyway." The ride into town felt longer than usual. Maylin's stomach was doing flips, her hands clenched together in her lap. Caleb didn't try to make conversation, just kept the horse at a steady pace while the sun sank lower toward the horizon. Red Hollow came into view, and Maylin could already hear music drifting from the town square. Fiddles and guitars, laughter, the sounds of people having a good time. Lanterns had been strung between buildings, casting warm light across everything. Caleb stopped the wagon near the church and helped Maylin down. She smoothed her dress, took a deep breath. "You look terrified," Caleb observed. "I am terrified." "Me too." He offered his arm. "But we're doing it anyway." They walked toward the square together, and Maylin felt every eye turn toward them. Conversation stuttered and stopped. The music kept playing, but several dancers missed steps, distracted by their arrival. Margaret Dalton stood near the refreshment table, surrounded by her usual circle of admirers. When she saw Maylin and Caleb, her face went through several expressions in rapid succession: shock, anger, something that looked almost like pain. Then her features settled into cold disdain. Sheriff Dalton was there too, his face darkening when he spotted them. He said something to his deputy, who nodded and moved closer to where Caleb and Maylin stood. Sarah Cooper appeared out of the crowd, Daniel behind her. "You made it! Maylin, that dress is stunning." "You made it possible." "I just provided fabric. You did the rest." Sarah linked her arm through Maylin's free one, creating a barrier between them and the staring crowd. "Come on, let's get some punch before all the good stuff's gone." They moved through the square, and slowly, gradually, people went back to their own conversations. The music swelled again. Dancers returned to dancing, but Maylin could still feel the weight of judgment pressing down on her from all sides. Morrison approached, his wife beside him. "Rourke, Mrs. Rourke, good to see you both." "Morrison," Caleb said, nodding, "wanted to thank you again for your help with those rustlers. Made a real difference." He glanced around, then lowered his voice. "And I wanted to say, despite what some people here think, you're both welcome at my table anytime." It was a small gesture, but it meant everything. Maylin felt some of the tension in her chest ease. Other ranchers came by over the next hour. The Hendersons, a couple named the Martins, a few others who'd been on the cattle drive. They were friendly, genuinely so, treating Maylin like a real person instead of a curiosity. But the town people, the shopkeepers, the church folk, the families who'd lived in Red Hollow for generations, they kept their distance, whispered behind hands, stared when they thought no one was looking. The music changed to a waltz, and Caleb turned to Maylin. "Dance with me?" Her heart started pounding. "Everyone's watching." "Let them watch." He led her onto the makeshift dance floor, and Maylin was acutely aware of the other couples giving them space, creating a circle around them like they were contaminated. But then Caleb's hand found hers, his other hand settled on her waist, and the rest of the world faded slightly. They moved through the steps they'd practiced, and Maylin focused on the pattern, on Caleb's steady presence, on not falling. She only stepped on his foot twice. Halfway through the dance, other couples started to drift back onto the floor. The Coopers, the Hendersons, Morrison and his wife, creating a buffer, showing solidarity without saying a word. When the music ended, there was scattered applause. Maylin and Caleb walked off the floor together, and she felt lighter somehow, like she'd passed some kind of test. "See?" Caleb said quietly. "Not so bad. Speak for yourself." "I'm sweating through this dress." He smiled. "You're doing fine." They got punch, which was too sweet and had definitely been spiked with something stronger, and found a spot near the edge of the square where they could watch the festivities without being in the center of them. Margaret appeared 20 minutes later, her smile sharp as glass. "Caleb," she said, ignoring Mei Lin completely, "I'm surprised to see you here. This kind of gathering doesn't usually seem like your style." "People change," Caleb said mildly. "Do they?" Margaret's eyes flicked to Mei Lin, dismissive. "Or do they just pretend to, for appearances?" "Is there something you want, Margaret?" "Just making conversation. It's what civilized people do at social gatherings." She took a sip of her punch. "Though I suppose some people weren't raised to understand that." The insult was clear. Mei Lin felt anger flare hot in her chest, but before she could respond, Caleb spoke. "My wife was raised to work hard, show respect, and not insult people to make herself feel important. If that's not civilized enough for you, that says more about your definition than her upbringing." Margaret's face went red. "How dare you?" "I dare because I'm tired of listening to you run your mouth." Caleb's voice stayed calm, but there was steel underneath. "You've spent years thinking your father's position gives you the right to treat people like dirt. It doesn't. And the sooner you figure that out, the better off everyone will be." "My father is the sheriff." "Your father is a bully with a badge, and you're a bully with a pretty face. Neither of those things impresses me." The people around them had gone quiet, listening. Margaret looked like she'd been slapped. Her mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. Finally, she spun on her heel and stalked away, her skirt swishing angrily. Sarah appeared at Mei Lin's elbow, grinning. "That was magnificent. Did you see her face?" "Everyone saw her face," Daniel said, chuckling. "That's going to be the talk of the town for weeks." "Good," Caleb said flatly. "Maybe people will finally leave us alone." But Sheriff Dalton had seen the exchange, and he was making his way toward them now, his expression thunderous. The deputy trailed behind him, hand resting on his gun. "Rourke," Dalton said, his voice carrying, "you got a problem with my daughter?" "I got a problem with people who insult my wife." "That's so." Dalton stepped closer, using his bulk to intimidate. It didn't work on Caleb, who stood his ground. "Seems to me you got a lot of problems lately. Getting shot at, making enemies. Might be time to think about moving on before those problems get worse." "Is that a threat?" "It's advice. From someone who's lived here a lot longer than you." Caleb's jaw tightened. "I'm not going anywhere." "Then you're a fool." Dalton looked at Mei Lin with open contempt. "Both of you. This town doesn't want you here. Never did. And one way or another, that's going to matter." "Sheriff," Morrison stepped forward, several other ranchers with him. "I think you've said enough." Dalton's eyes narrowed. "You taking his side now, Jack?" "I'm saying this is a community gathering, and you're disrupting it." Morrison's voice was firm. "Whatever problems you got with Rourke, handle them during business hours, not here." For a moment, it looked like Dalton might push back. But too many people were watching now, and even he wasn't stupid enough to start a fight in the middle of the harvest dance. "This isn't over," he said to Caleb. "Never thought it was." Dalton walked away, his deputy following. The tension in the air slowly dissipated, and people went back to their conversations, their dancing, their pretending nothing had happened. But something had happened. Lines had been drawn. Sides had been chosen. "You should go," Sarah said quietly, "before this gets worse." "No," Mei Lin said, surprising herself. "We came here to dance, so we're going to dance." Caleb looked at her, eyebrows raised. "You sure?" "I'm sure." The next song started, something faster, more energetic. Caleb led Mei Lin back onto the floor, and this time she didn't care who was watching. Didn't care about the whispers or the stares or Margaret Dalton's wounded pride. She focused on the music, on Caleb's hand in hers, on the way the lantern light made everything look warm and golden. She stumbled through the steps, laughed when she got them wrong, kept going anyway. Other couples joined them. The Coopers, the Hendersons, the Morrisons, creating a circle of normalcy, of acceptance, that pushed back against the hatred trying to suffocate them. When the music ended, Mei Lin was breathless and smiling, really smiling, for the first time in what felt like forever. "You did it," Caleb said. "We did it." "No, this was you." He squeezed her hand gently. "You stood up for yourself. You stayed when it would have been easier to leave. That takes courage." "I learned from someone stubborn." Stubborn's one word for it. They stayed for another hour, dancing a few more times, talking with the ranchers who'd shown them kindness, ignoring the town folk who still treated them like pariahs. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't some fairy tale ending where everyone suddenly accepted them, but it was real, and it was theirs. On the ride home, Mei Lin leaned against Caleb's shoulder, exhausted but satisfied. The stars were out, bright and sharp in the clear sky. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for tonight. You don't have to thank me. I do, because you gave me something I've never had before." "What's that?" "The chance to be myself, without apologizing for it." Caleb was quiet for a moment, then, "You gave me something too." "What?" "A reason to care, about something other than just surviving." He paused. "I spent so many years alone. Thought that was safer, easier. Then you showed up and made it complicated." "Is that a bad thing?" "No. It's the best thing that's happened to me in a long time." When they got home, Mei Lin changed out of her dress carefully, hanging it up like the treasure it was. She washed her face, braided her hair, put on her nightgown. But instead of going to her room, she found herself standing outside Caleb's door. She knocked softly. "Come in," he said. He was sitting on the edge of his bed, still dressed but barefoot, looking tired and content. "Can I ask you something?" Mei Lin said. "Always. Are you happy? With this marriage? With me?" Caleb considered the question seriously. "I don't know if happy is the right word. I'm not good at happy, but I'm content, satisfied, like things make sense in a way they didn't before." He looked at her directly. "Are you happy?" Mei Lin thought about it, about the ranch, the chickens, the garden, about poker games and wildflowers and learning to shoot, about standing in that square tonight, dancing despite everything trying to stop her. "I'm getting there," she said honestly. "For the first time in my life, I think I might actually get there." "Good. That's good." She turned to go, then stopped. "Caleb?" "Yeah?" "I'm glad you chose me. That day in the square. I'm really glad." His expression softened. "Me too." Mei Lin went to her room and crawled into bed, feeling the satisfying ache in her feet from all the dancing. She could still hear the music in her head, could still feel Caleb's hand in hers. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Dalton wasn't done with them. The town would still whisper. Life would still be hard. But tonight, she danced, and that was enough. In the dark, in her own room with the door that closed, Mei Lin smiled and let herself drift toward sleep. Outside, the prairie stretched endless under the stars. Inside, for the first time since leaving China, she felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. The nightmares that usually plagued her sleep didn't come that night. Instead, she dreamed of music and lantern light, of Caleb's steady hand guiding her through the steps, of a future that might actually be worth fighting for. When morning came, she'd face it the same way she'd faced the dance, with her chin up, her spine straight, and the knowledge that she wasn't alone anymore. She had a partner, a home, a place she belonged, and nobody, not Dalton, not Margaret, not the whole damn town, could take that away from her. The morning after the dance, Mei Lin woke to the sound of hammering. She dressed quickly and found Caleb outside, reinforcing the barn door with extra planks. "What are you doing?" she called from the porch. "Making sure things are secure." He didn't look up from his work. "Dalton's not going to let last night go. Better to be prepared." Mei Lin's stomach sank. The warmth from the previous evening evaporated like morning dew. "You think he'll come after us?" "I think he's been looking for an excuse for months, and we just gave him one." Caleb hammered in another nail. Humiliating his daughter in public, getting support from the ranchers, standing up to him at a community gathering, that's not something a man like him forgives. "So what do? We stay alert. We don't give him any real ammunition." He finally looked at her. "And we don't back down. The minute we show fear, he wins." The next week passed in tense anticipation. Caleb kept his rifle closer than usual, checked the property boundaries every day, slept lighter. Mei Lin found herself jumping at shadows, seeing threats in every distant rider. But nothing happened. That was almost worse. The waiting. The not knowing. Sarah came by on Thursday with her children, ostensibly to return a dish, but really to check on them. People are talking, she said once the kids were outside playing, about the dance, about what Caleb said to Margaret. Let them talk, Maylin said, kneading bread dough with more force than necessary. Some of it's good talk. Morrison and the other ranchers are making it clear they support you both, but the townfolk, Sarah trailed off. They're saying things, ugly things. And Dalton's been meeting with the territorial marshal. Nobody knows what about, but it can't be good. Maylin's hand stilled in the dough. What kind of ugly things? That Caleb's dangerous, that he threatened Margaret, that he's got a violent past and shouldn't be allowed to own property. Sarah's expression was troubled. They're building a case, Maylin, trying to find legal grounds to run him out. There's nothing legal about it. He hasn't done anything wrong. Since when does that matter to men like Dalton? Sarah reached across the table, squeezed Maylin's flour-dusted hand. I just want you to be prepared. Whatever comes next, it's not going to be fair. After Sarah left, Maylin told Caleb what she'd said. He listened quietly, his face unreadable. They can build whatever case they want, he said finally. I've got the deed to this land. Bought it legal, paid in full. They can't just take that away. Can't they? Caleb's silence was answer enough. They both knew that law out here was flexible, bent to serve whoever had the most power. And in Red Hollow, that was Dalton. 2 days later, the marshal showed up. Maylin saw him coming from the garden. A man in his 50s with silver hair and a badge that caught the sunlight. He rode slowly, deliberately, like he had all the time in the world. Caleb, she called, someone's coming. Caleb emerged from the barn, wiping his hands on his pants. He watched the marshal approach with narrowed eyes. Marshal Garrett, what brings you out here? Garrett dismounted, his movements stiff. Official business, I'm afraid. Got some questions that need answering. About what? About an incident in town, a couple weeks back. Report says you threatened Sheriff Dalton's daughter. Caleb's jaw tightened. I didn't threaten anyone. I told her to stop insulting my wife. That's not how she tells it. Says you grabbed her arm, got in her face, scared her half to death. Garrett pulled out a notebook. Says she's been having nightmares ever since. That's a lie. You calling the sheriff's daughter a liar? I'm saying she's exaggerating to get what she wants, and what she wants is us gone. Garrett wrote something in his notebook. There were witnesses, folks who say you were aggressive, hostile. There were also witnesses who saw her insult my wife first, who saw me stay calm the whole time. You talked to any of them? I'm talking to you right now. Garrett looked past Caleb to where Maylin stood. That your wife? The Chinese girl? The way he said it made Maylin's skin crawl. Not Mrs. Rourke. Not even your wife. Just the Chinese girl. Like that was all she'd ever be. Her name is Maylin, Caleb said, his voice dropping to something dangerous. And she's my wife. Show some respect. Just establishing facts. Garrett closed his notebook. Here's the situation, Rourke. There's been complaints, multiple complaints, about your behavior, your temper, your past. The territorial governor takes these things seriously. Wants communities that are stable, law-abiding, safe for families. I haven't broken any laws. Haven't you? Threatening a young woman, causing public disturbances. Rumor has it you've got a history of violence, maybe even killed some men down in Texas. I was a soldier. I did what soldiers do. That was legal. Was it? Garrett's smile was cold. Or were you a deserter? Running for military justice? Because if that's the case, well, that changes things considerably. Maylin felt ice form in her stomach. This wasn't about Margaret or the dance. This was bigger. They were digging into Caleb's past, looking for anything they could use. I was honorably discharged, Caleb said flatly. Got the papers to prove it. Then you won't mind showing them to me. Caleb's hands clenched into fists, but he nodded. Wait here. He went into the house, came back with a worn envelope, pulled out papers that had been folded and refolded dozens of times. Discharge papers, dated and signed, stating that Caleb Rourke had served his term and been released without prejudice. Garrett studied them for a long time, clearly disappointed. These look legitimate because they are. Still doesn't change the fact that people are scared of you, that you make folks uncomfortable. Garrett handed the papers back. My advice? Sell this place. Move somewhere you're wanted, before this gets messier. I'm not selling. Your funeral. Garrett mounted his horse. But don't say I didn't warn you. Dalton's got influence. He pushes hard enough, finds the right leverage, you might not have a choice. He rode off, leaving Caleb and Mei Lin standing in the yard, the threat hanging in the air like smoke. What do we do? Mei Lin asked quietly. We hold our ground. But Caleb's voice lacked conviction. For the first time since she'd known him, he looked genuinely worried. That night, they sat at the table long after supper was finished, not playing cards, not talking, just existing in the heavy silence. Finally, Mei Lin spoke. If we left, if we sold and started over somewhere else, would that be so bad? Yes. Caleb's response was immediate and firm. I told you why I can't leave. This land is mine. I built this place with my own hands, paid for it with money I earned. If I let them drive me off, then I'm right back where I started, property that belongs to someone else, existing at their mercy. He looked at her. I won't go back to that. I can't. Even if staying means losing everything anyway? They can't take the land without cause, and I haven't given them cause. They'll make up cause if they want it bad enough. Caleb didn't argue, because they both knew she was right. The answer came 3 days later in the form of fire. Mei Lin smelled smoke before she saw flames. She'd been in the chicken coop collecting eggs when the acrid scent hit her. She ran outside and saw it, the north pasture burning, grass fire spreading fast in the dry autumn air. Caleb, she screamed. He was already running from the barn, grabbing tools, yelling instructions. Get water! Wet down the barn roof! Don't let it spread to the buildings! They worked frantically, desperately, hauling bucket after bucket from the well. The Coopers appeared. Someone must have seen the smoke. And then Morrison and the Hendersons, a dozen hands fighting the blaze. It took 3 hours to get it under control. By then, 20 acres were burned black, 3 of Caleb's cattle dead, and everyone was covered in soot and ash. How'd it start? Morrison asked, studying the burn pattern. Caleb pointed to the origin point. There. See how it spread out in all directions? That's not natural. Natural fires start at one edge, move with the wind. This started in the middle. Someone set it, Morrison said grimly. Yeah, someone did. They found the evidence an hour later, a partially burned oil-soaked rag near where the fire had started. Deliberate, intentional, arson. Caleb rode into town that same afternoon, Mei Lin beside him despite his protests. They went straight to the sheriff's office. Dalton looked up from his desk with feigned surprise. Rourke, heard you had some trouble. Someone burned my pasture, killed my cattle. Caleb dropped the rag on the desk. That's arson. Against the law. Last I checked. Dalton picked up the rag with 2 fingers, studied it. Could be anything. Could have blown in from somewhere else. It was soaked in oil and placed in the middle of dry grass. That's not an accident. You got witnesses? Anyone who saw someone setting this fire? No, but then it's your word. Could have been a lightning strike, ember from a campfire. Hell, could have been you setting it yourself for the insurance money. Caleb's expression went deadly still. What did you just say? I'm saying without proof I can't investigate. My hands are tied. Dalton dropped the rag in the trash. But I'll keep my ears open. Let you know if I hear anything. You won't do a damn thing. Now, Rourke, that's not fair. Fair? Caleb leaned forward, palms flat on the desk. You've been trying to run me out for months. You send your marshal to dig up dirt on me. Your daughter lies about me threatening her. And now someone burns my land and kills my livestock, and you sit there pretending you give a damn about justice? Careful. Dalton's voice went cold. You're getting awfully close to accusing me of something. I'm not accusing. I'm stating facts. Then state them with proof. Otherwise, you're just making noise. Dalton stood up, matching Caleb's posture. Here's a fact for you. You're not wanted here. You never were. You bring trouble everywhere you go. And sooner or later, that trouble's going to catch up to you. Is that a threat? It's a prediction. Mei Lin grabbed Caleb's arm before he could do something stupid. Let's go. Listen to your wife, Dalton said with a sneer. At least one of you has sense. They left the office, Caleb shaking with barely contained rage. On the street, people stared and whispered. Margaret stood outside the general store, watching them with a small, satisfied smile. She knows, Maylin said quietly. Look at her face. She knows exactly what happened. Knowing and proving are different things. They climbed into the wagon. Caleb sat there for a moment, gripping the reins so hard his knuckles went white. I want to burn their whole town down, he said quietly. Every building, every self-righteous hypocrite hiding behind their church and their laws while they destroy people for sport. But you won't. No, because that would make me what they say I am. He released the reins, breathed deep. We go home. We repair the damage. We survive. That's all we can do. The ride home was silent. When they arrived, Sarah was there, sweeping ash from the porch. Thought you could use some help cleaning up, she said. Daniel's checking the fence lines, making sure the fire didn't damage them. Thank you, Maylin said, feeling tears prick her eyes. You didn't have to. Yes, we did. Because this could have been our place just as easy. They're coming after you now, but who's next? Morrison? The Hendersons? Sarah set down the broom. This isn't just about you anymore. It's about whether we let bullies control our lives. Over the next week, something remarkable happened. The ranchers rallied. They helped Caleb repair fences, donated cattle to replace the ones lost, brought supplies and labor and support. It wasn't everyone. The town folks still kept their distance, still whispered and pointed and condemned. But the people who actually worked the land, who understood what it meant to build something from nothing, they stood together. Morrison organized a meeting at his ranch, invited everyone who'd helped fight the fire. We need to talk about what happens next, he said, addressing the dozen families gathered in his barn. Dalton's making it clear he wants Rourke gone. Today, it's fire. Tomorrow, it could be worse. And if we let him get away with this, none of us are safe. What can we do? Henderson asked. He's the sheriff. He's got the law on his side. Does he, though? Morrison pulled out a letter. I wrote to the territorial governor, told him what's been happening. The forced marriages, the harassment, the fires. Asked for an investigation into Dalton's conduct. You did what? Daniel Cooper looked shocked. That's dangerous, Jack. Dalton finds out. Let him find out. I'm tired of being scared of him. Morrison's jaw was set. We all signed that letter. Everyone in this room. We're making it official. We want a new sheriff. Caleb stood up. I appreciate what you're trying to do, but this is my fight. I don't want you all risking It stopped being just your fight when they burned your land, Morrison interrupted. We're all in this together now. Either we stand up to Dalton, or we spend the rest of our lives bowing to him. The room erupted in agreement. Maylin watched these people, these rough, practical frontier families, choose courage over comfort, choose what was right over what was easy. Then we do it smart, Caleb said. No violence, no giving Dalton ammunition. We build our case, present it proper, and let the governor decide. Agreed, Morrison said. In the meantime, we watch each other's backs. No one rides alone. No one leaves their property unguarded. They spent the next hour planning, organizing, preparing for whatever came next. When the meeting ended, Maylin and Caleb rode home in the dark. The prairie stretched out endless around them. You know this might not work, Caleb said. The governor might side with Dalton, might decide a sheriff's word is worth more than ours. Maybe, but at least we tried. You're not scared? Maylin thought about that, about fear, about spending 6 years in Red Hollow being afraid, of judgment, of violence, of never belonging, about marrying a stranger and being terrified every day that she'd made a mistake. I'm terrified, she said honestly, but I'm also tired of being afraid, tired of letting other people decide who I'm allowed to be. She looked at Caleb. You taught me that. When you stood up for me at the hotel, when you refused to hide, when you chose to fight instead of run. You showed me that being afraid doesn't mean you have to surrender. Caleb reached over and took her hand, just held it, warm and solid and real. I'm glad I chose you, he said quietly. That day in the square. Best decision I ever made. Maylin squeezed his hand back. We chose each other. Maybe not at first, but somewhere along the way, we chose this. Chose us. Yeah, Caleb said. We did. The response from the territorial governor came 3 weeks later. Marshal Garrett delivered it personally, his expression grim. Governor's sending an official investigator, he told Dalton in the middle of the street, loud enough for half the town to hear. Should be here within the month. They'll be looking into allegations of corruption, abuse of power, and failure to maintain law and order. Dalton's face went purple. This is ridiculous. I've served this town for 15 years. Then you've got nothing to worry about. Garrett handed him the official notice. Cooperate fully. That's an order. After Garrett left, Dalton stood in the street holding the paper, rage radiating off him like heat. His deputy tried to say something, but Dalton waved him off and stormed into his office, slamming the door hard enough to rattle windows. Margaret found Mei Lin at the general store the next day. Her face was pale, her usual smugness gone. "This is your fault," she hissed. "You and your husband. You've destroyed my father." "Your father destroyed himself," Mei Lin said calmly. "We just refuse to let him destroy us. He's the sheriff. He keeps this town safe." "Safe for who? You? The people who look like you, talk like you, worship like you?" Mei Lin felt anger rise in her throat, hot and clean. "What about people like me? Your father made it clear I don't belong here. That I'm something to be mocked and degraded and driven out. That's not safety. That's tyranny. You don't understand how things work. I understand perfectly. The powerful stay powerful by convincing everyone else they deserve it, by making the rules and then changing them whenever it suits them." Mei Lin stepped closer, and Margaret actually flinched. "But here's what you don't understand. I'm not afraid of you anymore. Not you, not your father, not this whole town. You took everything you could from me, and I'm still standing. That must terrify you." Margaret's eyes filled with tears, but Mei Lin felt no satisfaction, just exhaustion, just the bone-deep tiredness of fighting for scraps of dignity. "Your father is a bully," Mei Lin said quietly, "and you're becoming just like him. Maybe the investigator will clear him. Maybe they'll find he did nothing wrong. But either way, you need to decide who you want to be. Someone who hurts people to feel powerful, or someone who finds strength in kindness. Because the first path only ends one way." She walked away, leaving Margaret standing there alone. The investigator arrived on a cold November morning. His name was William Cross, and he was nothing like what anyone expected. Young, barely 30, with sharp eyes and a notebook he wrote in constantly. He spent a week in Red Hollow, interviewing people, reviewing records, asking questions that made Dalton sweat. He visited every ranch, talked to every family, pieced together the story of what Red Hollow had become under Dalton's rule. When he came to Caleb's ranch, Mei Lin made coffee and tried not to hope too hard. Cross listened to their story without interrupting, took notes, asked for clarification on dates and details, examined Caleb's discharge papers, the deed to their land, the burned rag they'd saved as evidence. "Off the record," he said finally, setting down his pen. "I've seen this before. Small towns where the sheriff becomes judge and jury, where power corrupts until people forget there's supposed to be justice. It's ugly, and it's common, and it's damn hard to prove legally." Mei Lin's heart sank. "But," Cross continued, "I've got enough. The forced marriages alone are questionable. Governor's office never authorized that. The harassment, the fires, the failure to investigate crimes against certain citizens while prosecuting others for minor infractions. It paints a picture. A bad one." "So what happens now?" Caleb asked. "I submit my report. The governor reviews it. If he agrees with my assessment, Dalton will be removed from office and replaced. Could take a few months, but..." Cross smiled slightly. "I'm good at my job, and my assessment is going to be very clear." After he left, Mei Lin and Caleb sat on the porch watching the sun set. Neither spoke for a long time. "You think it's really over?" Mei Lin asked. "Nothing's ever really over, but maybe this part is." "What comes next?" Caleb considered. "We keep working, keep building. We make this ranch into something real. He paused, seemed to gather courage. "We make a life. Together. Not as strangers pretending to be married, as actual partners who chose this." Mei Lin's throat felt tight. "I'd like that." "Yeah?" "Yeah." They sat in comfortable silence as darkness fell over the prairie. Inside the house, their house, lamps waited to be lit. Supper waited to be made. A whole life waited to be lived. The official notice came in December. Sheriff Dalton was removed from office, effective immediately. A new sheriff would be appointed by the territorial governor until proper elections could be held in the spring. The town reacted with mixed emotions. Some celebrated, some mourned. Most just accepted it as inevitable. Dalton left Red Hollow 2 days later, his daughter beside him, heading to some relative's place in Colorado. Margaret didn't say goodbye, didn't apologize, just left, her face hard and closed. Maylin watched the wagon disappear and felt something complicated. Not quite pity, not quite satisfaction, just the recognition that hurt people often hurt others, and the cycle only ended when someone chose to break it. The new sheriff was a man named Robert Kane, older and steadier, with no interest in building empires or controlling lives. He did his job and nothing more, which was exactly what everyone needed. Winter came, and with it, a kind of peace Maylin had never known. Snow covered the burned pasture, made everything clean and new. She and Caleb worked together, prepared for spring, talked about expanding the herd. On Christmas Eve, Sarah and Daniel came for dinner, their children filling the small house with noise and laughter. Morrison stopped by with a bottle of good whiskey. Even some of the townfolk, the ones brave enough to admit they'd been wrong, made gestures of friendship. It wasn't perfect. Some people still stared at Maylin on the rare occasions she went into town, still whispered, still judged, but it mattered less now. Because she had a home, had friends, had a husband who stood beside her not out of obligation, but out of choice. Late that night, after everyone had gone and the house was quiet, Caleb gave her a small wrapped package. "What's this?" Maylin asked. "Open it." Inside was a delicate jade pendant on a silver chain, simple, beautiful, the kind of thing her mother would have worn. "Caleb, this is—" I asked Sarah to help me pick it out. "Wanted to get you something that mattered, something that said—" He struggled for words. "Something that said you matter to me, more than I know how to express." Maylin felt tears slip down her cheeks. "I didn't get you anything." "You gave me everything." Caleb reached out, wiped the tears away gently. "You gave me a reason to care again, to fight for something other than survival. You turned a house into a home." "We did that together." "Yeah, we did." He helped her put on the necklace, and Maylin touched the smooth jade, feeling its weight against her skin. "I love you," she said. The words surprised her. She hadn't planned to say them, but they were true, had been true for a while now, and she was tired of hiding true things. Caleb's expression shifted, went soft in a way she'd never seen. "I love you too. Have for weeks now. Just didn't know how to say it." "You just did." He kissed her then, gentle and careful, like she was something precious. And maybe she was. Maybe they both were. Two broken people who'd found each other in the worst circumstances and somehow built something beautiful anyway. Spring came eventually, as it always did. The burned pasture greened over, new grass pushing through ash. Caleb's cattle multiplied. Maylin's garden exploded with vegetables. They hired help, a young man from town who needed work, who didn't care where Maylin was from or what Caleb had done before. Life continued. Not perfectly. They still fought sometimes, still struggled with money and weather and the thousand small hardships of frontier life. Caleb still had nightmares occasionally. Maylin still felt the weight of being different in a place that valued sameness, but they faced it together, and that made all the difference. 1 year after the forced marriage gathering, Maylin stood in the same square where it had all begun. The town was holding a proper harvest festival this time, no dark undertones, just genuine celebration. She wore her blue dress and the jade necklace. Her hair was down. Caleb stood beside her in clean clothes, his hand resting lightly on her back. Morrison approached with a grin. "Mrs. Rourke, looking lovely as always." "Thank you, Mr. Morrison. Your husband told me you're expecting. Congratulations." Maylin touched her stomach instinctively, still getting used to the reality of it. A baby. A whole new person they'd made together. The thought terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. "Thank you," she said. "We're cautiously optimistic." "You'll be great parents, both of you." Morrison tipped his hat and moved on. The music started, fiddles and guitars, familiar and welcoming. Caleb turned to Maylin with a raised eyebrow. "Dance with me?" "Always." They moved onto the floor, and this time Maylin didn't stumble. didn't feel every eye watching, didn't care about the few people who still disapproved. She focused on Caleb, on the music, on the feel of his hand in hers, on the life they'd built from nothing but stubbornness and hope. "You know what I realized?" she said as they moved through the familiar steps. "What?" "That day in the square, when you chose me, I thought my life was ending. Thought I was being sentenced to misery with a stranger who'd eventually resent me. And now? Now I think that was the day my life actually began." She looked up at him, this complicated man who'd become her whole world. "You didn't save me, Caleb. You gave me the space to save myself, taught me I was worth fighting for." "You taught me the same thing." The music swelled around them, and Mei Lin felt something she'd never expected to feel in Red Hollow, in America, in this life she hadn't chosen. She felt happy. Not the kind of happiness that came from everything being perfect, but the kind that came from knowing she was exactly where she belonged, with exactly who she was meant to be with, building exactly the life she wanted. The song ended. Another began. They kept dancing. Around them, the town square buzzed with life and laughter. Children played, couples swayed, neighbors talked and shared food, and existed together in something approaching harmony. And in the middle of it all, two people who'd been thrown together by circumstance and desperation held each other close and proved that sometimes, just sometimes, the things forced upon us become the things we choose to keep. Because strength wasn't about never being afraid. It was about being afraid and standing your ground anyway. Belonging wasn't about everyone accepting you. It was about accepting yourself and building community with those who saw your worth. And love, real love, wasn't poetry and grand gestures. It was showing up every day, fighting together, building something that mattered. Mei Lin had learned all this the hard way, through pain and fire and endless small battles. But she'd learned it, and she'd never forget. When the music finally stopped and they walked hand in hand back to their wagon, Mei Lin looked at the stars overhead. The same stars that had watched her arrive in America alone and terrified 6 years ago. "Thank you," she whispered to them, to the universe, to whatever forces had brought her here. Caleb squeezed her hand. "For what?" "For you, for this, for the chance to become who I was always meant to be." He kissed her forehead gently. "Come on, let's go home." Home. The word filled her with warmth. They climbed into the wagon and headed into the darkness, toward the small ranch house waiting on the prairie, toward the life they'd chosen, toward the future they'd build together, one stubborn day at a time. And as the lights of Red Hollow faded behind them, Mei Lin smiled and held tight to the man beside her, knowing that whatever came next, they'd face it the same way they'd faced everything else, together.